Chapter 627. Hades's voice was very loud, and the entire underworld was his territory. Naturally, his words were like a world channel. As long as one had a hearing system and a brain, they would be able to hear him. The wretched old man, Charon, who was rowing the boat quickly and was happily thinking about robbing Pluto's treasure, naturally heard it too. Hades's divine power instantly shattered the confusion effect that Thea had set in his mind. Charon suddenly woke up. "Where am I?" Looking around, he was currently at the lower part of the river Styx, the river of sighs. What did I do just now? Although he was confused, his memory was still there. He had just wanted to rob Pluto's treasure. Therefore, with this thought in mind, he rejected Hades's summon without thinking. Now that he was going to find Hades and tell him that he had repented and become a god again, was it too late? It was definitely too late. Charon's old face was crying. Hades had already sworn in the name of Pluto. If he went back on his promise, the entire underworld would abandon him. He would lose all his face. The old man didn't think that he could make Hades make such a big sacrifice. Looking at the two passengers on the boat with hidden bitterness, Thea returned a very amiable smile. "It's over." Charon looked at the river Styx that he had served for tens of thousands of years and was dejected. He was about to lose his job. What was more painful than losing his job was that he might not even be able to keep his life. If he had known earlier, he would have compensated Thea directly. He could have paid in installments. Hades's shout could be heard by the entire underworld. Thea felt that her plan had taken a big step forward. Seeing the old man so regretful that his intestines turned green, she hurriedly comforted him. "The gods have already discussed. In the future, the river Styx will be under the jurisdiction of the Ocean Emperor. You don't have to be afraid of Hades. The Ocean Emperor will support you." She directly reassured him. Hearing that he had another job, Charon's despair improved a little. The intelligence of gods wasn't low. After all, they were old. Charon was speechless. Even if he saved his old life for now, what could he do in the future? He couldn't leave the river Styx, and Hades wouldn't leave the underworld. When the time came, he would be under Hades's nose every day. How could he expect Pluto to forget about the enmity with a smile? What a joke! At that time, the river Styx and the first prison would become the front lines of the battle between the Ocean Emperor and the Netherworld King. As the owner of the river Styx, he would have to face the Netherworld army head-on. Thinking about his future, or rather, his fate in the next few days, the old man had inexplicably become the vanguard of the anti-Hades movement. How could the word tragic describe this? But no matter how hard he thought about it, he couldn't think of a good way to get out of this predicament. He was like a flying insect trapped in a spider's web, surrounded by hunters sharpening their knives. The choice that fate gave him was to happily spend the last few days of his life. As for what happened after that, it was up to fate. As the saying goes, since you can't resist, you should enjoy it. What was the happiest thing for the old man? That was money. Was there any place in the land that could tempt him more than Hades's treasury? Anger rose in his heart, and evil grew in his guts. He might as well not rest until he was dead. He might as well go and snatch it himself. If he was bewitched by Thea's divine power before, then now he was wholeheartedly doing this. He pushed the boat quickly, and like an arrow leaving the bow, he rowed towards the depths of the netherworld. Thea saw his actions and secretly laughed. He was the son of the goddess of creation and had such a good background, but he ended up like this because of greed. She and Diana continued to close their eyes and rest, their minds focused on the battlefield in the distance. With the help of many heroes and gods, Hades's decline was finally reversed. However, he had a trump card. Hera had inherited all of Zeus's treasury, so she wasn't just for show. She pulled out a sword from her waist and chanted an incantation loudly. In an instant, wind and thunder roared, and a large patch of dark clouds appeared out of thin air, covering tens of thousands of miles of the sky in the battlefield of the gods. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, and large balls of lightning raged between the clouds, occasionally attacking the creatures on the ground. However, due to the negative energy of the dead on the ground, the chances of them being struck by lightning were much higher than ordinary people. Zeus. All the creatures of the underworld, including Hades, were the focus of attention. The divine power contained in the clouds was no stranger to the brothers and sisters. It was left by Zeus. In the brilliant divine power, they seemed to see the mighty god king again. Needless to say, This was left to guard against Hades. Apart from being too fickle in love, Zeus was actually very good to Hera. If he didn't have many backup plans, Hera wouldn't have come to confront Hades no matter what Thea said. Because this thundercloud contained the divine power left by Zeus, it lasted for a long time. Within the range of the thundercloud, all the dead suffered varying degrees of damage. The gods were only slightly embarrassed, but the army on the ground was annihilated. Under the leadership of Antiope, the Amazon female warriors rode tall horses and penetrated the army of the dead several times. The warriors of the sea race and the giants also chased after them. The dead were like wheat being reaped, and a large number of them fell. Although they could still be resurrected, it would be a matter of a day later. It was difficult to determine the outcome of the battle between the gods for a while. What surprised them was that the first to break the stalemate was the mortals who they didn't pay attention to before. The pair of Supergirl and the Flash developed a tacit understanding during the chase with Hermes. Barry's speed was faster than Hermes. After grasping the opponent's maximum speed, he suddenly accelerated and threw a lightning bolt at Hermes, who was chasing after him. This kind of attack didn't cause much damage to Hermes, but Supergirl, who caught up later, hit Hermes with all her strength. After fighting with Apollo many times, Supergirl's attacks naturally carried a lot of divine power that belonged to the sun god. She didn't know how to use divine power. If she didn't know how to use it, it might slowly dissipate. But once she went all out, Apollo's divine power and the energy absorbed from the stars surged out in an instant. Her attributes were restrained, and her strength crushed Hermes, who was already a half-dead creature, causing heavy damage. A punch with a sonic boom directly hit Hermes' chest. The former god of speed directly burst into a cloud of blood mist, and the light attribute began to attack his body. Hermes opened his eyes and glared at Supergirl. "You!" Seeing that he could still speak, Supergirl, who was afraid that she had hit him too hard, was quite happy. Sister Thea didn't lie. These guys' bodies are really strong. It was a very depressing thing to live by suppressing one's strength every day. Seeing that Hermes could still speak, this guy was obviously fine. There was nothing to say. Let's give him another punch. After one punch, Hermes, who was pretending to be a tough guy, lay in the mud and completely fainted. Chapter 628. After dealing with Hermes, Supergirl and the Flash split up. The Flash went to help the Amazons, while Supergirl went to help her old friend Apollo. Apollo, who had the upper hand, was shocked when he saw a red cloak flying to his side. He was traumatized by Supergirl. When he knew that she was here to help him deal with Thanatos, he snorted unhappily. Although she was not a god, Supergirl's attack naturally contained the energy of a star, which was very effective against Thanatos. Facing two unreasonable human-shaped suns, it was only a matter of time before Thanatos was defeated. At the same time, in the depths of the underworld, Thea's small team, Rob the Rich to help the poor, also arrived at the door of Pluto's treasury. Seeing the two women stepping on the land on the shore, Sharon, the boatman, finally breathed a sigh of relief. The transaction was completed, and the shackles of the divine power were gone. However, he was not happy at all. He, who had not been ashore for tens of thousands of years, thought of Pluto's treasury, and his heart seemed to be lit with evil fire. After a little hesitation, he also jumped ashore. The pitch-black door was so heavy that it seemed to be able to stagnate the air. Hades' treasury was not only big, but it was also built very widely. Just a rough estimate of the area covered was comparable to a street in Star City. Even Diana, who was not greedy, could not help but be amazed. How many treasures did it take to build such a huge building to be a warehouse? I want 30% of the treasures. Sharon, who had a pair of triangular eyes, was even more dazzled by money at this time. He almost forgot his surname. Thea was very unhappy. How dare you talk about money with the goddess of wealth? Although the holy sword was with the clone, the justice dagger given by the Heavenly Father was still at hand. You greedy old man, do you want to test my dagger? She was unhappy, but she did not say it out loud. Instead, she asked, we are the ones who organized the crusade against the underworld. What value do you have to take 30% of the treasures? The old man smiled eerily. I have no value, but my brothers do. Look at this. As he spoke, he took out a token with the unique symbol of the sleeping god, Hypnos, and a pair of wings covered in feathers. Speaking of this token, it was a very long story. At first, Hypnos thought that Sharon was his half-brother, so they had to keep in touch with each other, so he gave him a token. But later, they found that this brother was too unbearable. He only cared about making money, which was simply unreasonable to the extreme in the eyes of the gods. What was the use of money to the gods? They tried to persuade him several times, but to no avail. Sharon only had that little hobby. He didn't care about anything other than small amounts of money. As time passed, Hypnos had long since given up on his half-brother. You can just count money in the sticks. It had been so long that both parties had forgotten about this matter. Now that Sharon was pushed to the edge of the cliff by Thea and Hades, he finally thought of his brother. However, he wasn't a kind person at all. He didn't want to ask his brothers for help or put in a good word for them. What he wanted was to use his brothers as scapegoats. Using Hypnos as a scapegoat? This idea sounded a little ridiculous at first, but it wasn't difficult at all. It could even trigger a chain effect on the battlefield. Thea secretly calculated. Her original plan was to force a deal with Hades and leave him with a copper coin. Now, with Charon's enthusiastic help, things could develop more harmoniously and orderly. Thea immediately changed her original plan. Hypnos and Thanatos were twins. If Hades had a conflict with his right-hand man, the scene would definitely be very funny. She would get the treasure and let someone else take the blame. This business was completely feasible. How about this? Let's sign a new final agreement. All the coins of the sticks will belong to you. What do you think? Thea pulled out a slate from the void and prepared to do a second business deal with Sharon. Sharon trembled when he looked at the slate, but his greed suppressed his fear. He read the contents in trepidation. All the coins belong to me? You don't want any of it? What we want are weapons, treasures, and anything that can increase our strength, Thea said honestly. Sharon pursed his lips, indicating that he didn't understand. Coins were the best thing in the world. Why would these two women want those weapons and treasures? Crazy. Thea also didn't understand why this guy was so obsessed with money. Was it because of some psychological trauma in his childhood? After looking at each other in disdain, Sharon confirmed that Thea wouldn't add any additional agreements and finally agreed to the deal. After completing the new agreement, Thea signaled to Sharon that it was time for him to show his worth. As the three of them hesitated at the entrance of the treasury, the guardian of the treasury finally got up slowly. Cerberus, the three-headed hellhound. All the three-headed hellhounds were its direct descendants. Its current duty was to guard the treasury of the Styx. However, for thousands of years, the surrounding area was a forbidden area. It was used to slacking off and didn't realize that strangers had come. Thea and the others discussed for a while. Only then did the three-headed hellhound realize its duty. It stood up shakily, wanting to see who had disturbed its sleep. This fellow wasn't beautiful at all. Thea narrowed her eyes and glanced at it. It had 3 ugly heads, 6 ferocious eyes, and a tail that didn't look like a cute dog tail. Instead, it looked more like a snake's tail. In any case, it looked like it was going to be chopped up. Holding back Diana, who was about to draw her sword, Thea signaled to Sharon to negotiate. The shivering boatman Sharon walked in front of the three-headed hellhound. The three-headed hellhound sniffed with its 3 big noses. This fellow had a very strong aura of the underworld. It seemed like he was one of them. The 3 ugly heads looked at each other, waiting for Sharon to speak. Sharon lived up to his nickname of a treacherous villain. He didn't care about brotherhood and took out Hypnos' token like a lackey. Lord Hypnos ordered us to go to the treasury. Let us in. Actually, Sharon had the thought of leaving Thea and the others behind and taking the treasury for himself. However, he quickly dismissed the thought. Hades already had a death feud with him. If he offended Hera and Poseidon as well, would he still be able to live? At that time, even if his mother, the goddess of creation, appeared, she wouldn't be able to save him. As it turned out, Hypnos' token was quite useful. The three-headed hellhound's 3 thoughts were all tangled up and its consciousness was a little chaotic. It usually needed the help of Hypnos to sleep. To a certain extent, it had to give face to the god of sleep. The 3 heads had a messy conversation. Sharon tossed the token to one of the heads. The other party carefully identified it and confirmed that it was indeed the token of Hypnos, the god of sleep. Only then did it slowly step aside. Sharon, who had rowed the boat on the river Styx for tens of thousands of years, had a lot of strength. He anxiously placed his hands on the door. The 10,000-ton stone door was slowly pushed open by him. Chapter 629. Exerting all his strength, He pushed open the door. Before he could rest, the old man's eyes were blinded by the jewels in the room. Fortunately, his hobbies and rationality reminded him. After identifying the direction, he rushed to the left side hall at a speed comparable to Hermes. A large amount of money was waving at him. The two girls walked past Cerberus and walked along the passage. They had to admit that Hades had a rich collection. Compared to Zeus's high standards, ordinary treasures could not catch his eye. Hades, on the other hand, did not reject anything. This was also the main reason why he built such a large treasury. Refined gold, mithril, and orichalcum were piled up in piles. Even Diana was a little surprised by the brilliance of the jewels and jades. "Take them all." Diana, who had always regarded money as dirt, could not help but have some hope in her eyes when she saw the jewels. Thea waved her hand and put all the jewels into her wealth dimension. She was going to split them up when she got home. After all, they were going to participate in the battle later. It would be awkward if they were discovered carrying the jewels. At the same time, she muttered in her heart. No wonder the underworld queen did not mention anything about going home after she was kidnapped. She was most likely moved by these tons of jewels. Along the way, their eyes were filled with the weapons and armor of ancient warriors, demigods and gods. There were also magnificent works of art. There were also divine weapons, demigods, quasi-divine weapons, and many magic equipment. They even saw a huge set of armor. According to Diana's appraisal, this was the armor of the second god king, Kronos. The two girls, of course, mainly Thea, were as happy as mice that had fallen into a rice bowl. No matter what it was, they put it all into their wealth dimension and looked at it carefully when they got home. Wow, so beautiful! The long-legged goddess suddenly stopped walking. Thea followed her gaze and could not help but be stunned. Not far away, four unusually strong black warhorses were looking at the two girls. Behind the four horses was a luxurious chariot. Hades' chariot. Thea was a little surprised. "Can we take this away?" Diana also asked carefully. This thing was alive, so it definitely couldn't be put into the wealth space. Besides, it was Hades's personal belongings, so he would definitely sense it if the two women took it away. However, Diana really liked these horses. Her eyes were fixed on Thea. To be honest, eldest Mrs. Love for horses was just that. It was better to drive a car than to ride a horse. These horses were not the cute type. However, for the sake of Diana's happiness, it was not too troublesome. She could take anything she wanted, but she had to change her method when it came to this object that was close to Hades and was a living creature. Forced buying and selling. This was her response. She took out another stone slab and threw it on the ground. This was considered a deal with Hades. One side of the deal was naturally the Pluto. On the other side, Thea did not leave her name. Instead, she left behind a character number from the creator star. From a macro perspective, this number also represented Thea, so it was not considered a scam. Hades only needed to personally go to the Heavenly Father to verify it. Thea left behind a copper coin, which was considered a forced deal. Unfortunately, Hades was being beaten up by a group of gods in the distance. He had no time to pay attention to such a small fluctuation of divine power. The four strong horses were originally looking at the two women warily. After the deal was completed, their expressions immediately became playful. Two of them even had fawning expressions. I want this one." Valkyrie happily chose a mare. In order to accompany her, Sia also chose a mare. As for the remaining two stallions, she didn't want to waste them. She put them into the space ring and let them keep the elk company. Since the horses were taken away, they naturally would not give up on the chariot. Thea felt that after today, Mr. Hades would no longer need a chariot. Wherever the two women went, not a single blade of grass grew. This was such a rare opportunity. They almost dug up the floor tiles. At this time, Cerberus could no longer sit still. Didn't they say that they were only here to take something on Lord Hypnos' orders? Why did it take so long? The three heads began to argue again. However, Hades had given strict orders to this guard. In order to prevent him from stealing, Hades had ordered him to not enter the treasury several times. Sharon was so greedy that he could ignore Hades, but Cerberus was not that crazy. He was worried that the people inside would not come out, but he did not dare to enter. Anxiety, uneasiness, fear of the unknown, all kinds of emotions filled the three heads that were already in a mess. What should they do? In the end, they came up with a solution that was not really a solution. They would not go in and just watch from outside. That would be fine, right? Along the door that Sharon opened, the three heads stood side by side and peeked behind the door. Thea and Diana had already walked into the depths of the treasury, so Cerberus could not see them. However, they discovered a busy figure in the left side hall. Old Sharon was full of energy. His footsteps were like the wind, and his body was full of energy. Although he loved money, he did not have much space ring. He could only use his divine power to wrap up the coins and move them out bit by bit. Was he tired? Running back and forth dozens of times was definitely tiring, but he was extremely happy. Regardless of whether he was a human or a god, wasn't happiness the most important thing? As the son of the goddess of creation, he loved small amounts of money. It was a hobby that did not affect the big picture. In the past, he would happily accept a few copper coins from a dead person. But now, facing the wealth that Hades had accumulated over tens of thousands of years, he was so excited that he wanted to jump up and down. Old Mr. Sharon was right under the 6 eyes of the Cerberus, moving the money over and over again. He was preparing to move all the money onto his ship, then lie down and sleep in the pile of money. Beautiful! What was this fellow doing? The Cerberus outside the door did not have any concept of wealth. At first, it was not clear what Karen's goal was. It was only when this fellow was like an idiot, mumbling to himself about his goals and motives, that the Cerberus finally understood. This fellow was actually a thief. Unfortunately, the loyal Cerberus could not go in. It was extremely anxious and could only pass the message to the Netherworld King. It had been asleep for too long, and with the heavy responsibility of guarding the ship, the Netherworld King did not summon it to participate in the battle. Thus, it did not know that its boss was being ganged up on. In order to tell the truth, or perhaps to shirk responsibility, it also sent Hypnos token over. Hades, who was being beaten up badly by Hera, Hercules, and Neptune's clone, suddenly received a message from the Cerberus. At first, he really did not have the time to read it. Fighting 3 gods alone, even with his tyrannical strength, he could not hold on much longer. There was a bloody hole in his left shoulder from Hera's lightning spear, and his right leg had been hacked by Hercules' axe. Due to the fierce battle and the wounds caused by divine weapons, his self-healing ability had been cut in half. He could only barely hold on. Seeing that he could still hold on for so long, Hera and Poseidon could not let him go. If they did not take this opportunity to beat him into submission, who would be able to withstand it next time? Neptune's clone, who was originally helping to pick up the spoils, also began to attack fiercely. The trident, which was also a top-grade divine weapon, was wielded vigorously by him. Every strike of the trident carried an irresistible pressure, forcing the injured Pluto to retreat step by step. Hades was not a fool. He knew very well that he might have a chance of winning against 2, but he definitely could not win against 3. His goal was to stall for time and wait for his subordinates to break the stalemate and help him instead. Hades only attacked once out of 10 times, and the remaining 9 were all defensive. Although he was in a sorry state, he felt that he would be the final winner. Chapter 630. With the confidence that he would win, Hades began to hold on bitterly. It was only when the Cerberus sent him a second message that he managed to use his divine sense to scan the situation. He was really busy this time. He flew up and kicked away the Sea Emperor's trident, knocked the Hercules axe aside with a punch, and used his twin tridents to block Hera's lightning spear. When he scanned it with his divine sense, he was given a fright. Sharon! What the F***CK? Was this guy's guts too big? Normally, he would lick his shoes whenever he saw him, but today, he actually burst forth with unparalleled courage. He had just said that he would teach this guy a lesson, but this guy didn't hide and wait for death. Instead, he turned around and robbed him. If he was defeated by Hera or Poseidon, it wouldn't be a humiliation. After all, they were all brothers and sisters. But now, he was being bullied by this old guy. Hades couldn't accept this. He had known that this old guy loved money since 10,000 years ago. But how did he have the guts to commit such a heinous crime? Very soon, the Cerberus sent him a command token. His eyes narrowed. Hypnos. The reason he was so daring was because the Death God and Sleeping God brothers were backing him up? Was this what Sharon was relying on? Hades instantly thought of the answer. While he was being attacked from all sides, he automatically filled in the blanks. Was Hypnos plotting a rebellion? Was he colluding with the gods? Had the brothers made some kind of deal with the gods behind his back? The more Hades thought about it, the more afraid he became. After all, the death god and sleeping god brothers had always been his left and right hands. Their prestige wasn't inferior to his. Thoughts surged in his mind, and he couldn't help but look at the death god and sleeping god brothers. The two brothers were fighting side by side against Apollo and Supergirl. In addition, Sea Emperor's 3 giant sons were also helping nearby. The two brothers had a tacit understanding of each other and worked together seamlessly. It was already fortunate that Supergirl Apollo didn't fight with her own people. Thus, even though it was 2 against 5, they still looked quite calm. If it was before he received the message from the Cerberus, Hades would feel that sleeping god's attacks were extremely graceful and agile. It was like he was dancing, silently affecting the enemy's 5 senses. But now he had a grudge. No matter how he looked at the sleeping god, he felt that this guy was just slacking off. He had been beaten black and blue by the 3 gods, and he had been waiting for reinforcements. Yet, they had been taking their time with the enemy. Hades's expression was a little gloomy. After exchanging a few more blows with the 3 gods with an ashen face, Hades relaxed a little and was heavily slapped in the face by Hera's spear. Only after receiving a real slap in the face did Hades shout, "Thanatos, come and help me." God of Death and God of Sleep were a little stunned. The direct result was that God of Death's elegant gray robe had 2 holes burned by Supergirl's heat ray. The 2 brothers were in a hurry to regain control of the situation. They were very puzzled. You need support when fighting against 3, but we don't need support when fighting against 5? In addition to the commanding tone in Hades's voice, the 2 brothers were very unhappy. Their seniority was high, their abilities were strong, and the brothers were of one mind. Usually, Hades would not speak to the 2 brothers like this. The 2 of them did not make any verbal or eye contact and chose to ignore him. "We are also the 2nd and 3rd figures in the underworld. We are not your servants, Hades. You have to respect us." The 2 of them acted as if they had not heard him, which made Hades even more sure that they were disloyal. Which was more hateful, the enemy or the family thief? Hades's answer was the family thief. In particular, he knew that God of Death and God of Sleep were very prestigious. Many of the underworld's fighting forces were under their command, which made Hades even more afraid. Now, he had used all his trump cards, but he was still beaten badly by the allied forces of the gods. Was it because of their secret obstruction? The more Hades thought about it, the more frightened he felt. He wanted to frighten his subordinates and let them know who the real boss of the underworld was. Taking advantage of the time when he was competing with Hercules, he flew up and came to God of Death and God of Sleep. He shouted gloomily, "Hypnos!" God of Sleep, who did not know the truth, thought he was going to say something. He turned to look at Hades. However, what greeted him was a black double-pronged halberd. The halberd was sharp, and Hades's eyes showed a cruel light. "He wants to kill me." Hypnos did not know why Hades would do such a thing in front of the 2 armies. He only knew that he had to dodge. During the Trojan War, Hypnos, the god of sleep, had done a sensational thing. In order to prevent the war from breaking out, he tried to use his ability to make all things fall asleep to sleep Zeus. Unfortunately, he failed and was directly banished to the underworld. Now, at the critical moment of life and death, this handsome sleeping man, who had always been elegant, burst out all the potential of his body and dodged the stab at the critical moment. The gentle Prince Charming was so scared that his face turned pale. He scolded Hades, "You're crazy!" Seeing that his fatal blow was dodged by Hypnos, Hades misunderstood him even more. He felt that Hypnos had been hiding his strength to give him a critical blow. He snorted and released the real power of Pluto. He wanted to take down this traitor in the shortest time and use it to frighten all the gods of the underworld. Unfortunately, he underestimated the telepathy of the god of sleep and the god of death. After tens of thousands of years together, the god of death had sensed Hades's sneak attack. Now, seeing that Hades was not going to let him go, the god of death could only join forces with his brother to fight against Pluto. What kind of conspiracy was this? This question lingered in the minds of Hera, Poseidon, Hercules, and Apollo. As for the naive Supergirl, she did not react. Why was her opponent fighting with someone else? The rest of the gods who were fighting a little further away were only stunned. The head of the 3 judges, Rhadamandes, who had already suppressed the Cyclops, was affected by the shock and was hit in the face by the Cyclops' rod. His handsome face was a little twisted, but he did not care about his enemy. He did not understand why the boss of the underworld was fighting with the second and third at this critical moment. This was going to be the end of him. Thea's doppelganger, who was playing with the firstborn, received a message from the main body. It was not difficult to figure out the truth. Money moved people's hearts. It could only be said that Sharon, a nobody, had inadvertently become the key factor that determined the outcome of the war. Thea's doppelganger hurriedly reminded Hera. Now, they had to prove that the two brothers could not clear their names even if they jumped into the Styx. If the underworld was divided into two, it would be a miracle if they could still win. When Hera received her message, her eyes were initially filled with horror. Although it was a little unbelievable, she did not lose anything by saying a few words. She immediately shouted, "Thanatos, Hypnos, I, Hera, swear that as long as you help us take down Hades, I will accept you on behalf of Mount Olympus. I will let bygones be bygones." Chapter 631. Hera's heart was thumping wildly as she said this. It was truly because of the strength of these two brothers. If either Thanatos or Hypnos were to be singled out, they would be able to tie with Hera, who had yet to become a god king. If the two brothers worked together, they would even be able to fight a god king. This was evident from the fact that Hades, who was wielding his halberd like a windmill, was unable to take down the two brothers. Unlike Sharon, who was alone, they had many demigod children and a large number of subordinates. Now, the second and third prisons of the underworld were under their control. As long as the two brothers were pulled to their side, they would win this expedition. Hearing Hera's straightforward words, Poseidon was a little stunned. He did not know the cause and effect of the incident, but he knew how to rope people in. However, he did not have the status of the central government like Hera, so his efforts were not as effective. Hera and Poseidon spoke at the same time, which was another signal in the eyes of the gods of the underworld. They were indeed colluding. The subordinates of the god of sleep, the god of death, looked at the allied forces of the gods and their former comrades, and began to think about their own positions. Apollo looked at Hera with a strange face. He had always been unconvinced by Hera, but now he was a little frightened. He did not believe that this was a coincidence. He imagined that Hera had secretly colluded with the two gods. The two brothers could not only help the gods defeat Hades, but also intimidate him. He clicked his tongue in his heart. Hera's means were silent. He did not know that she had such a delicate plan. Hades thought that he had exposed the two brothers' traitorous faces in advance and vented his anger on them. The halberd in his hand moved faster and faster. Up until now, the two brothers still didn't know what had happened. However, even a person made of mud would have a temper. Unlike Charon, who had no great ambitions, they were gods with dreams and abilities. As the sons of the goddess of creation, they were of noble birth and didn't lack scheming. It was only because of their bad luck that they ended up in their current situation. Deep in their hearts, they did not think that they were worse than Hades. In the face of Hades's fierce attacks, they had to think about their future. Should they change their allegiance, or should they become kings? This time, the two brothers communicated telepathically. They quickly reached an agreement and communicated with Hera. Mount Olympus was the center of the gods. This was the current consensus of the Greek pantheon. When Hera heard their request, she immediately agreed without hesitation. She then announced loudly, "I am Hera, the god of gods. On behalf of Mount Olympus, I acknowledge the jurisdiction of Thanatos, the god of death, and Hypnos, the god of sleep, over the underworld. From now on, the brothers are the twin Pluto. PFFF." Seeing this scene, Thea's doppelganger burst out laughing. Now it was even more lively. Hera was really making careless promises. She was basically overdrafting the divine king's credibility. However, this had nothing to do with Thea. She was happy to watch the show. The battlefield could indeed be described as bustling. The two armies that were originally clearly divided now suddenly split a quarter of the army from the underworld army. This group of people stood there awkwardly. Finally, under the leadership of the two brothers' sons, they joined the allied forces of the gods. The originally evenly matched battlefield collapsed in an instant. One side gained a quarter of their army, while the other side lost a quarter of their army. There was no suspense in this battle. The connections that the two brothers had built up over the years played a key role. Hades was arrogant and unruly. His attitude towards his subordinates could be described as harsh. On the other hand, the two brothers were relatively gentler. Although the change was sudden, there were many people who supported them. One of the three judges, Minos, also joined the camp of the gods under the persuasion of the two brothers, Su Wei Lai, who talked about the past with the two brothers. The Tauran army that was directly under him immediately changed sides and attacked the army of the dead. The morale of the allied forces of the gods was greatly boosted. The situation quickly deteriorated out of control. Hades finally panicked a little. He began to promise benefits to his subordinates. Unfortunately, his reputation had never been high. The advantage of the allied forces was snowballing. Everyone could see that it might be better if the ruler of the underworld was changed. A few gods who had joined the battle because of his face left one after another. Many Greek undead heroes automatically ran to the two brothers' camp. They had originally promised to serve Hades once. Now that they had been officially appointed by Hera, the two brothers were the official Hades. The army was defeated like a landslide. Now, only the queen of the underworld, the eldest son, the two judges, and a large number of demigod descendants were left by Hades' side. In terms of combat power, they could still fight. Unfortunately, the subordinates were uneasy. Ordinary undead didn't have intelligence and weren't affected by morale. However, the gods and demigods weren't. They had thoughts and eyes. The loyal ones were thinking about defense plans, and the more active ones were already thinking about what they should say when they joined the two brothers. The gods were all full of fighting spirit. Hercules took the lead and directly killed his way into the first prison. Hades hurriedly reorganized the army in an attempt to restabilize the situation. Unfortunately, the army's resistance was extremely weak. The first prison was forcibly broken by the gods. The second and third prisons were the two brothers' traditional territories. Hades had tried his best, but unfortunately, he was surrounded by more than 10 gods. He could only retreat with hatred in his heart. It was worth mentioning that during the battle in the third prison, the original bodies of Thea and Diana returned with a full load. The two of them secretly merged with their doppelgangers. On the battlefield in the third prison, the eldest son didn't know that the enemy had played a big trick on him. In a hurry, he was directly captured by Thea and Diana, together with Supergirl and a bunch of Green Lanterns. As if knowing his fate, the eldest son struggled with all his might. Unfortunately, the three girls were not much weaker than him. The chains of the Green Lanterns tightly bound him. Thea and Qing Nu took turns to attack his consciousness with compassion. Thea's mental injuries had not healed. In addition, Thea had drunk the white poplar fruit, which was a special product of the underworld. The fruit of the underworld's sacred tree could greatly improve one's mental strength. Now, not only had Thea's old injuries healed, but she had also improved. With the help of Qing Nu, who was equally determined and had incomparable compassion, this time, no one disturbed them. They spent the whole day wearing away the hostility in the eldest son's heart. After washing away the dust, the firstborn, who was facing his own heart again, finally welcomed a rare moment of peace. The monstrous hatred, 10,000 years of loneliness, and 6,000 years of perseverance had all turned into the nourishment of compassion. The eldest son, who was originally surrounded by countless wronged souls, burst into tears when he put on the Green Lantern ring. He hugged Hera and buried his head in her arms as he cried. When Thea saw the eldest son again, she, as the initiator, was very surprised. 10,000 years of grievances had disappeared in a single day. Now, the eldest son was like a wise scholar. He was not driven at all. His eyes automatically emitted compassion. At this level, even Qing Nu was not as good as him, let alone Thea, who used compassion as a weapon. Thank you for your help. I'm really relaxed now. The eldest son exhaled and looked relieved. I've already said goodbye to my mother. I want to go around the world and see how big the universe is. It's incredible. I was too short-sighted before. Escapades. After that, he laughed at himself and waved at them in a carefree manner. He carried his sword and left the underworld alone. As for whether he would go to the outside world or the universe, no one knew. The eldest son's strength was too strong. Even the Green Lantern ring could not restrain him. The Green Lantern ring was more like a communication device to him. The eldest son left the group of friends and family of Hades. Not only did the god of death and god of sleep leave the group, but they also dragged a bunch of people to join the other group. The situation of Hades was a perfect example of what it meant to be defeated like a landslide. Now, he was the only one left who could fight. Every time he fought, 10 powerful gods would jump out to beat him up. How could he stand it? Chapter 632. Zeus might be able to fight 10 gods at once, but he couldn't. Fighting 3 gods at once was his limit. The situation was so bad that he had no choice but to do something shameless. Hades! Surrender! The gods won't make things difficult for you. Hera shouted from the bottom of the 4th prison. Even she didn't believe what she said. If she didn't take this opportunity to kill Hades, when would she? However, she had underestimated Hades's viciousness. She saw Hades standing within the boundaries of the 4th prison. He looked at the gods with disdain in his eyes. Hera, look at who this is. Hades waved behind him, and a large number of dead people pushed a giant coffin in front of the gods. A 10-meter-tall giant lay in the coffin. It was obvious that the giant had died long ago, but his body still emitted a bronze luster, accompanied by a strong oppressive aura. The few powerful gods all sensed the great power contained in the corpses. Sia really did recognize this corpse. Back then, when she and Hera had wreaked havoc in the underworld, the young mistress had pulled out the holy sword in a fit of rage and stirred up the entire underworld, awakening many dead people. This corpse was one of the strongest people back then. Hades, Poseidon, Zeus's father, the second god king, the titan Kronos. At that time, Kronos's consciousness was very limited. It was probably less than 1% of his peak state, but he had already caused a great deal of damage to the underworld. Now, Hades had dragged out their father. What was he going to do? Chop him up and make soup? Then share a bowl with his brothers and sisters? Hera and Poseidon were also puzzled. They didn't say anything and just looked on coldly. They wanted to see what Hades was up to. Hades didn't let them think too much and revealed the answer himself. He took out a ball of unknown green substance and waved it at the gods. This old thing's soul is still in my hands. As long as you take a step forward, I will revive him. With a body and a soul, plus my authority of Hades, Kronos can be revived. Do you dare to bet with me? Let's see if this old thing will kill you first or hit me first. At this time, Hades's hair was disheveled, and he looked like a madman. When Sia saw this scene, she clicked her tongue. This tactic of not being able to defeat old daddy was very creative. In the outside world, the reunion of father and daughter would be a joyous occasion, but it was not the case for the King Greek gods. Their father was not benevolent. Kronos was afraid that his children would overthrow him. Every time his wife gave birth to a child, he would swallow the child into his stomach. Similarly, his son was unfilial. Zeus overthrew his father and saved his siblings. After that, he silently killed them. From the huge hole in Kronos's chest, it could be seen that this was done by Zeus. No one else had the ability to do so. Now that Hades was really anxious, he threw out a huge bomb. If you guys hit me again, I'll resurrect my old man. Today, there was no Zeus to deal with Kronos. This former god King Titan was filled with rage, and he could easily crush the gods. Mount Olympus had taken everything away from him, and Hades had resurrected him. Hades was betting on Kronos' attitude and the gods' fear of the Titan King. His ruthlessness had indeed shocked the gods. Hera, who was astute in small matters, immediately hesitated. Once Kronos, the son of Gaia, was resurrected, he would definitely absorb the power of the underworld to recover his divine power. It would be difficult for the underworld to escape. However, Mount Olympus and Hera would be the ones to take revenge. In fact, Hera already had the intention to retreat, but she was too prideful to admit defeat. She lowered her head and pondered. Hades looked at her nervously, his heart in turmoil. If he could live a good life, he would not want to resurrect his old man. The amount of divine power needed to resurrect a god king of this level was simply astronomical. Even if he was the king of Hades, borrowing the power of the underworld to do such a thing was not low risk. Even if he was resurrected, with his old man's character, he might turn around and eat him. No one could be sure. The cards had been played. It was now up to Hera to choose. Poseidon looked at the scene coldly. Kronos was the son of Gaia. He hated the sea, so he was the least stressed out among the gods present. Hades held the remnant of his father's soul in his hand, his heart uneasy. He was the most stressed out among the gods present. Seeing Hera unable to make up her mind, he felt bitter. Fortunately, someone finally spoke up to persuade Hera. Retreat, Hera. A woman in a t-shirt and shorts, dressed like a modern person, walked out of the void with an owl perched on her shoulder. She was holding a baby in both hands. The sudden appearance of the woman shocked all the forces. "Who is this woman?" The Flash looked at the woman and asked the little beauty Kara beside him. It was difficult not to notice this modern person in a group of ancient armored people. Kara was usually a little muddle-headed, but the Kryptonians had a good memory. She stroked her cute chin and thought for a moment. "I think she is Sister Diana's former employee. But I remember Sister Thea said that the child she was carrying was Zeus." Such a complicated interpersonal relationship made Supergirl frown. The Flash was also dumbfounded when he heard this. He decided to just watch happily. They did not have divinity, so they could only watch the show. However, the gods present still recognized the woman's true identity. "Athena!" Several gods shouted at the same time. That's right. This woman who suddenly appeared with a baby was the cause of everything a year ago. She was Diana's former employee, Miss Zora. Of course, now that her divine soul had awakened, Zora's 20 years of experience was nothing compared to Athena's enormous past. It was directly assimilated. Back then, it was because of her and Hermes's respective plans that they had pulled Diana into this whirlpool. Unfortunately, due to Hermes's repeated interference, the original plan did not even have a trace of its shadow. Hermes was severely injured and imprisoned by the gods, and she had long retired to the third line to give birth to a baby. With a helpless expression, she sat and watched the situation develop to such a strange state. She silently gave birth to Zeus's Smuff, but faced with such a complicated situation, even the goddess of wisdom was very puzzled. How did things develop to such a stage? Originally, she was hiding in the dark, sorting out the situation, analyzing the causes and results, and trying to redirect the situation to her desired state. Unfortunately, Hades's desperate gamble had completely messed up her plan. If Kronos revived, everyone would be unlucky. Hera felt that she would bear the brunt of it. In fact, Zeus's hatred was the greatest. Zeus's main body was now sleeping, and he was creating a Smuff again. It could be said that he was at his weakest. The gods could not find his hiding place, but the second-generation god king, Kronos, could. At that time, facing his son, Zeus, who could not resist at all, should Kronos braise him or steam him? Chapter 633. Athena had no choice but to step in personally. Things were already bad enough. She couldn't let it get any worse. Hades didn't expect his big move to expose Athena. When Hermes brought the mortal Miss Zola to the underworld, Hades didn't see anything special about her and didn't take her seriously. Now, reality slapped him in the face. This woman was Athena's incarnation. The problem became complicated. There was an even bigger conspiracy behind his niece. It didn't take much intelligence to figure it out. Hera, Apollo, Eris, Diana, and Thea, who pretended not to know anything. These gods who participated in the battle for Zola on Paradise Island all looked at Athena in confusion. Athena enjoyed the strange looks of the gods. In the past, she would be proud of her intelligence. Now, she only felt bitterness. "The war should end here," she said to Hera earnestly. In the past, Hera's attention was usually on Zeus's illegitimate children. This was why Athena was so nice to her. However, now that she enjoyed the taste of power and the sense of accomplishment of commanding an army to decide the direction of the world, Hera's jealousy was washed away. She couldn't be jealous even if she wanted to because Zeus had too many illegitimate children. More than half of the 12 main gods were illegitimate children. There were also many demigods on the battlefield, such as Diana and the ancient Greek heroes who had joined them. Even Hades's queen of the underworld and the 3 judges of the underworld. All the handsome demigods were basically Zeus's children. Now, she was leading a bunch of her husband's illegitimate children to fight her own brother. If she was her usual self, she would have died from anger. Thus, she enjoyed Athena's respect. She looked at the baby in Athena's arms with a strange expression. She didn't feel anything strange. But how was this possible? How could Zeus and Athena give birth to an ordinary person? Athena must be plotting something. Hera was sure of this, but this wasn't the time to talk about it. Hera looked at Hades again. Her cold expression returned to being dignified. Okay, the war of gods ends here. When she said this, she was very happy. Could the era of Zeus attack the underworld? He couldn't, but she could. Your Majesty, what about us? If she wants to retreat, the god of death and the god of sleep will suffer. Even Hypnos, the god of sleep, is a little anxious. When you retreat and Hades comes to settle the score, what will we do? Hera was indeed clumsy when it came to the overall strategic direction, but she had been doing this kind of thing for thousands of years and was extremely experienced. She immediately comforted the two brothers and once again used her name as the Divine King to guarantee that the two brothers' current interests would not be harmed. The two brothers had no choice but to follow the gods back to the third prison. Over the next few days, Athena acted as the middleman and mediated between the two sides. After tireless efforts, they finally finalized the final agreement. Athena was speechless when she saw the agreement that she had worked so hard to broker. As the loser, Hades suffered the most. Not only did his left and right hands take away a large number of elites, but now the two brothers were also against him. Being arrogant, he didn't ask the two brothers why they wanted to rob his treasure. The two brothers were actually in a state of confusion, but they were used to acting cool. Even if they were confused, outsiders couldn't see through their expressions. Hera was determined to keep the two brothers on the same level as him. Hades gritted his teeth and acknowledged the title of Hades Gemini. But he didn't want to be outdone and changed his title of Hades King to Emperor of the Underworld. Seeing that he changed his title, Hera thought for a moment and changed her title from Divine King to Emperor of the Gods. She was on par with Poseidon, the Emperor of the Sea, and Hades, the Emperor of the Underworld, and slightly suppressed them. The first three prisons were the territories of the gods. Despite Hades's insistence, under the mediation of many neutral gods in the underworld, it fell into the hands of the two brothers. Now that the first three prisons were gone, the jurisdiction of the river Styx had nothing to do with him. Hera and Poseidon didn't even ask for his opinion and decided on the ownership. Old man Charon made a windfall and held on to his job. Other than being bitten twice by Cerberus when he rushed out of the treasury, he didn't suffer any other losses. He was very satisfied. An earth-shattering battle had come to an end. Hades would need decades to stabilize the internal chaos of the underworld, let alone attack Mount Olympus. This time, he had been besieged several times, and the injuries he received required a large amount of divine power to recover. Overall, despite the constant changes along the way, they had achieved their goal when they set off. The gods returned victorious, and the whole of Mount Olympus was filled with joy. Hera held a banquet to celebrate, and at the same time, quarreled with Athena behind closed doors. The allies played around for 3 days before slowly dispersing. Supergirl went back to school, and Barry continued to track down Reverse Lightning. Thea didn't feel anything unusual from the baby. In the end, whether Zeus continued to act as his smuff or talk to his wife in detail, that was other people's business. It had nothing to do with her anymore. She and Poseidon still needed to discuss the issue of the god of death staff. After setting a time, they went home. There were too many items to check. Mount Olympus and the underworld were too crowded, so it wasn't a good place to check. They returned to Paradise Island. With the help of the enchantment set up by Thea, the two girls had time to sort out their gains. There were all kinds of precious materials, expensive accessories, countless rare treasures, and all kinds of powerful equipment piled up like mountains. There were weapons of famous warriors, and divine weapons of various gods who had passed away. Now that Thea relied more on magic in battle, she didn't have a high need for equipment. The Valkyrie was so beautiful that she almost forgot her surname. Thea helped her replace all the original beginner's godly equipment. Among the equipment, the two girls had obtained the greatest harvest was a set of Kronos' armor and shield. Kronos' father was Gaia's son, the second-generation god king. He was born with the power to control the earth. His armor was thick and sturdy, and it had a lot of special features such as being invulnerable to the ground, immunity to all kinds of negative statuses, immunity to mind control, enhanced strength, speed, and so on. However, he was of the Titan race and was tall. No matter how long Diana's legs were or how tall she was, she couldn't wear this set of armor. In order not to attract attention, they definitely couldn't wear the original armor out for an exhibition. They had to remake it. Diana's forging skills were completely useless on this set of top-grade divine armor. Hephaestus, the god of blacksmithing in Greece, also couldn't let him know. Fortunately, Thea was an employee of the new god race. She opened a sonic tunnel and went straight back to the new god race's god of blacksmithing, Hayati. Hayati was originally in this line of work. Without saying anything, she began to forge the armor for her. As for Diana's size, she was very clear about it. 3 days later, Thea returned to Earth with bags of various sizes. So many parts. The Valkyrie was a little surprised as she covered her mouth and started to check. She also started to try on the armor. Chest protector, shoulder protector, arm protector, helmet, and leg protector. The entire armor was dark red with gold lining, and with a red cloak, it looked very cool. Thea was very satisfied. As for Diana's previous set of armor, she kept it as a souvenir. She could give it to anyone who wanted it in the future. To be honest, Thea had never liked that set of armor. The main reason was that it was too revealing. Below the neck, a large amount of skin was exposed. Even half of the cleavage was exposed. There was no need to talk about the pants. It was just a pair of triangular shorts. Her entire thigh was exposed. Not to mention its defensive properties, this design had always made Thea unhappy. It was just that divine equipment were hard to come by in the outside world and she couldn't afford to change it. Look at Fiora's armor. It was covered tightly with 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. If one didn't look at the chest of the armor, one wouldn't be able to tell that it was a woman. This was worth learning. Chapter 634. Thea took off Diana's armor without hesitation. The long-legged goddess instantly became naked. This was something that Thea had been complaining about. She had been fighting in her armor all this time. Hephaestus was the one who made the armor in the newbie village. It fit Diana's curves perfectly. Of course, it was not because he had measured it himself. Otherwise, Thea would have killed him even if they were separated by the sea of stars. When he made it, Diana was still a baby. In order to leave room for future growth, one of the characteristics of the divine armor was that it could automatically adjust according to the size. When you were big, it would be big, and when you were small, it would be small. At least, according to Thea's estimation, Diana's current size was slightly bigger than when she left the island. The armor's ability to automatically increase in size was based on her powerful memory and touch. After wearing the armor for a long time, Diana did not like wearing cumbersome undergarments. They were meaningless to her. Ancient Greek values believed that beautiful things did not need to be covered up. It was the same whether it was during her tribal life thousands of years ago or when she entered modern society. Now, even when she attended social events, she would dress up with a deep V-neck and a bare back. She looked dazzling and sexy. Most of the time, she would simply forget to wear undergarments. She would wear a long dress and attend events. The young mistress would occasionally wear nothing, but it was all because she was lazy. Now, she had to cultivate Diana's habit of wearing undergarments. In the past, she was not afraid of fighting a few criminals. Those criminals could not break through her armor. In the future, the scale of the battles would grow larger. The comic world had a mysterious power to prevent clothes from being torn, but it did not exist in the real world. What if the armor broke in the future when they fought against Darkseid? Wouldn't it be a great opportunity for others? Must I wear it? Diana asked with a frown. Of course. There are many benefits. Thea held a bra that Aramani had woven with spider silk and divine threads as she spoke cheerfully. Diana looked at her with a faint smile. What benefits? Prevent irrelevant people from peeping? Could this be considered a benefit? The young mistress racked her brains, but she really couldn't think of any benefits at the moment. As for things like preventing sagging, promoting growth, and ensuring blood circulation, these were all nonsense to them. Seeing that her eloquent lover was at a loss for words, Diana laughed heartily. The indescribable thing on her naked chest also shook twice, making the eldest Mrs. Hart itch. Laurel, Babla, and the others don't seem to wear it either. They all wear Kevlar combat suits, so I think you're... Diana laid out the facts and reasoned. Finally, she pointed at the underwear in Missy's hand and shook her head. Her meaning was self-evident. Thea felt helpless at the mention of this. The female superheroes and villains here basically wore tight clothes. There were many people like Ching Nu, who wore a small singlet on top and 2 curtains on the bottom. The heroines in Gotham were fine, but Star City's Laurel, in order to completely separate herself from her daytime identity, wore leather clothes, fishnet stockings, and long boots. She was completely different from her daytime image as a lawyer. After thinking about it, there were still many problems with female superheroes. They would need to be fixed in the future, but Thea decided to start with herself. She forcefully explained, "They all appear at night, unlike you. From today onwards, I will supervise you. You must wear it." Are you really going to wear it? You must wear it. Diana took the underwear and looked at it. She had to admit that Diana's craftsmanship was not bad. She was at least a full-fledged tailor. She was also born in Greece, so her aesthetic was completely in line with Diana's standards. After thinking about it, the goddess retorted, "You still have to wear it." Thea talked nonsense with her for a long time, but she couldn't win against the goddess of war. She could only surrender helplessly. "Okay, I'll wear it too." After taking off the quilt, Diana saw that she was also wearing nothing. She laughed silently and proudly raised her nose. Thea picked a few pieces and then realized the problem. These were all prepared for Diana. She didn't prepare anything for herself. She had magic and the light ring, so there was no possibility of her clothes exploding. She reluctantly chose one, but realized that it wouldn't work after putting it on halfway. A mischievous thought appeared in her mind. She looked at Diana flirtatiously and said playfully, "Oh, it seems a little tight." Diana was furious. "Thea Quinn, you. Say that again. How preposterous. Even the good-tempered goddess of war couldn't take it anymore. How could you not even put on half of the underwear prepared for me? This is too infuriating. What else can you say? A little tight. It's your skin that's too tight. How is it tight? I think it's loose. Here are all gaps." Diana fiddled with it angrily. In the end, she had to admit that it might be a little tight. The two girls had different chest shapes. Thea was originally slender. Now that she was a goddess, her body proportions had reached a perfect level. From the shape, it looked like a beautiful water droplet. The bottom half was fuller than the top half. It looked trembling and full of temptation. Diana, on the other hand, had the traditional Greek shape of Venus. From the side, it looked like a semicircle. From the indescribable points, her upper half was larger than Thea, while her lower half was smaller than Thea. This made it so that Milady could put it on at first, but it was a little tight in the end. It took her a long time to put it on. Seeing this, the goddess of war was very unhappy. "I want to ascend to godhood too," Diana roared in her heart. She had never been so desperate for a perfect divine body. Since Milady set the example, Diana could only put it on speechlessly. To be honest, she was really not used to it. The two girls agreed to supervise each other. Only then did this little episode come to an end. After playing around for a long time, she finally remembered that there was still the armor. Thea put on a t-shirt and sat aside to watch Diana try it on. This new armor was forged from the giant armor of Kronos. The design was considered from several aspects, and it was a bit like the holy garment in a certain anime. In the end, it was not as tight as Fiora's, but it looked much more dignified than Diana's previous style that exposed her chest and back. With a deep red base and golden lines, it occasionally revealed some skin between movement and stillness. Diana's majesty revealed a kind of wild nature. Diana was a pure warrior. Her bloodline also made her magic resistance extremely high. It was just that magic was strange and unpredictable. Even the high magic resistance of the gods needed to be protected. Thea installed a gem on each of the shoulders and knees of the new armor. Ordinary gems could not store high-level magic, but these gems were the treasures of the underworld that Hades had contributed. She stored 2 time-stop spells, 1 long-distance teleportation spell, and 1 powerful healing spell in the gems. "Why did you fix the gems in the equipment?" The goddess of war was a little puzzled. Wasn't it better to hold it in the hand? The space ring was not a high-level equipment. Thea also made one for her after she ascended to godhood. Milady's answer to this was that if the equipment did not have gems, it would not be equipment. The original Guardian silver bracelet's quality seemed to be very strong now. As a divine artifact that had accompanied Diana for thousands of years, she chose to continue wearing it. The divine power that she usually did not use was accumulated and then burst out. Such a strong special effect made Thea envious. The original shield was made from a nameless metal that Zeus found in some corner. Now, it was a little behind the times. After obtaining the treasures of Hades for thousands of years, she could have as many rare metals as she wanted. The shield did not need to trouble the new creation star. Diana could reforge it herself. Chapter 635. Diana's original shield was smelted again, and a large amount of adamantine was added to it. In the end, Diana's shield was imbued with a lot of compassion emotions. Although it wasn't to the point where Diana's shield would turn into stone at first glance like Medusa's shield, when the enemy saw Diana's shield, they would also be affected by the emotions of compassion. Except for a few people with strong wills, the attacks of the others would naturally be weakened. The new shield was full of compassion, so it was bronze in color with silver edges. Ancient Greek inscriptions were drawn on it, which translated into English as protect. In addition, the edges of the shield were thickened. In Thea's view, the shield was for defense. There was no need to throw it out to hit people. The edge of the shield was too thin and was not good for defense. If she had the time to throw the shield, she could just jump over and slash with the sword. As for the weapon, she still had to use the previous twin swords. There were many weapons in Hades' treasury, but they were of the same level as the twin swords and were not worth replacing. Diana's equipment was brand new. Feeling the deep affection of her lover, she did not stay idle for the next few days. Artemis's silver moon longbow was returned to the Amazons, leaving only the arrow of Zeus that could travel through time. Thea did not know why Thea worked so hard to help her. In order to thank her for her selfless help, she took the initiative to use the power of the Divine Emperor to erase the mark of Zeus and the moon goddess on the arrow. The arrow would be Thea's own in the future. Diana had collected a lot of precious materials before, and now she had the treasury of Hades. She wanted to make a divine longbow for her lover. She used the spine of the black dragon that was cut off by the great sword of the firstborn that day as the body of the bow, mixed with a handful of fine sand that was blessed by Rhea, the mother of Hades, the mother of Poseidon and Zeus, and Diana's grandmother, the goddess of time. The spine of the black dragon, mixed with the sand of time, gave the bow an eternal and indestructible characteristic. The bowstring used the tail of the Hydra, which also had the characteristic of regeneration. In the final stage of making the bow, Thea injected the divine power of wealth into the bow, and the divine artifact was finally completed. Thea Quinn's Wealth Longbow was the name of the new bow. Thea didn't have a time-related divine concept, so she couldn't use most of the temporal sand's functions. However, with her wealth, the temporal sand would add a depreciation function on top of the temporal sand's forceful purchase. It was impossible for her to buy an enemy's divine weapon with 1 copper coin, but it was completely possible for her to exchange for an enemy's divine weapon with 30 to 40% of its value. Originally, she wanted to call it Fortune Longbow, but Diana strongly objected, so she changed it to Wealth Longbow. The ideal situation would be for Thea to shoot a few arrows, and the enemy would be very discordant. Both of their equipment had been greatly improved. Only then did they have time to pay attention to the miscellaneous items that they had obtained. Some items could improve their physical fitness, so they ate them directly. Some items had various additional effects when worn, so they chose to wear the items that they liked. There were still many items that even Diana's erudition and Thea's divine eye of wealth couldn't identify their uses. For example, the scepter beside Thea's hand. Diana frowned and looked at it for a long time before giving up helplessly. Thea could only look for the archaeologist Dr. Savannah. This old man was really knowledgeable. He looked up several books and finally confirmed the origin. Thea was a little speechless when she received the answer. Hades had too many hobbies. Not only did he have Greek gods' items, he also had Egyptian gods, Norse gods, Mesopotamia, and other random items that he thought were good. It would take a lot of time to identify all of them. She couldn't be bothered to waste time, so she gave all the items that she couldn't identify and didn't seem dangerous to the bald Dr. Savannah, who had forgotten his own name after seeing ancient treasures. In the following days, Thea and Diana spent another 2 days together in the name of supervising each other. She left the Valkyrie to familiarize herself with the new equipment and continue to comprehend the origin while she went back to deal with her own trivial matters. Thanks to the agreement between the human world and Atlantis, the Moira people's popularity had improved greatly. Many commentators took turns to publish articles, saying that the United States would walk out of the valley under the leadership of President Quinn and revive the economy. More ordinary citizens were full of expectations for the new government with the protection of superheroes. Now that it was the final moment of the election, even if the other party's candidate was God, he wouldn't be Moira's opponent. Of course, this God referred to the one in the Bible. However, it was hard to guarantee that someone would take the risk and do something stupid. From this battle in the underworld, Thea was more and more certain that history was made by small people. This saying was a bit biased, but it wasn't completely wrong. The ferryman Sharon was a vivid example. The two cold-hearted Prince Charming who didn't know that they were cheated probably still didn't understand the truth of the matter until now. In order to prevent anyone from doing anything to Moira, Thea returned to the United States and began to protect her mother. "Yo, long time no see. You're getting prettier now." The one who greeted her with a smile was Amanda, who rushed over today to make friends with her. The nature of the Heaven's Eye Society determined their dependence on the government. Without the support of the government, they couldn't do anything. Fortunately, she and Thea had a sibling relationship for so many years. Although there were some bumps in the small things, at least they didn't break down on the big picture. Now that they were on the same side, she immediately came to express her goodwill. One doesn't slap a smiling face, and Thea wouldn't embarrass her. Besides, although the relationship between the two had been going back and forth, it was generally harmonious. Did the Heaven's Eye Society make any big moves recently? She asked casually. Amanda was a little distressed when she mentioned this. There are more and more superheroes, but the criminals are getting more and more rampant. I really miss the days when I only had to deal with explosives and bullets. Thea couldn't solve this problem, so she could only comfort her. The two were just talking in general. After all, Amanda was responsible for the president, not the president's daughter. Sia was also quickly surrounded by a group of military bigwigs. The army was beaten up badly by the Atlanteans. The military's current point of view was that humans still had potential to be excavated. Currently, the military's equipment upgrade was not fast enough. We felt that it could be faster. After dealing with this group of people, Thea didn't want to continue upgrading weapons and equipment. The current technology tree was already climbing fast enough, and the foundation was not stable. There was really no need to start new projects. The military felt that they were inferior to Atlantis, but the problem was, how many years did they study to achieve today's results? Tens of thousands of years, and they wanted to catch up with them in a few years? It was impossible. The current Earth's military force was enough to protect itself in the future. Forcibly developing technology and equipment would only cause a large deficit in the government, and it was not conducive to improving the people's lives. Whether from Moira's point of view or her own wealth, the next step was to vigorously develop civilian products and revitalize the economy. Chapter 636. In the next half a month, Moira began to do the final publicity without stopping. Thea and Oliver also followed her to all the major cities in the United States. There were really people who were not afraid of death. Some gunmen received black money. The moment they made a deal, Missy could instruct the Green Arrow team to clear the obstacles. Some of them did not make a deal at all and simply wanted to make themselves famous. She had no good way to deal with them and could only rely on tight defense to ensure their safety. In just half a month, there were 3 assassinations and kidnappings. Yes, that's right. There were even 2 kidnappings. Sia, who had already revealed her identity as a superhero, generally did not dare to provoke her. After all, during the battle with Doomsday, ordinary people would not be able to withstand her ability to flatten buildings and create deep pits with a raise of her hand. They targeted other people. A group of people kidnapped Moira's important staff. Fortunately, they were rescued by the Sky's Eye Society in time. Another group of people lost their minds and wanted to kidnap Oliver for ransom. They were beaten up by the Green Arrow team, making the insiders laugh and cry. Another day of farce ended. Thea followed her mother to win votes. The secretary could only chase after them with a pile of documents from time to time to look for people. The electronic office was very fast, but many documents still needed her to sign in person. The campaign team ran wildly in all the major cities in the country. Miss Maisie also had to chase after them. She brought documents for Missy to sign every 2 or 3 days. Miss Maisie had a strong body. An ordinary woman would have died of exhaustion. After signing another stack of documents, Thea leaned herself against the back of the chair and looked out of the window. Miss Maisie instantly understood her intention. She grabbed the pen on the table and threw it out. "Who is it? Come out." Even if it was an ordinary pen, it was thrown out of the window like a sharp arrow. The person outside the window was stunned for a moment. Then he was surprised. "Yo, not bad." A hand wearing a black leather glove instantly reached out and grabbed the pen at a very clever angle. Then, the other party took advantage of the momentum and drew a semicircle. The original throwing force was skillfully used, and with a new force, it flew straight towards the secretary. Miss Secretary didn't try to catch the pen. Instead, she stomped on the ground and did a beautiful backflip to avoid the attack. A vigorous man in black jumped in through the window. Miss Maisie narrowed her eyes and looked at Thea first. However, Miss Maisie pretended to look at the documents and didn't show any expression because of the sudden appearance of the man. It didn't seem to be an enemy, but the other party didn't seem to have any intention of revealing his true identity after entering the room. This was something worth pondering. "May I ask who you are?" Miss Maisie still maintained her elegant etiquette, as if she wasn't facing a man in black, but a business negotiation. Seeing that Thea had no reaction, the other party's face twitched slightly, and he deliberately said in a hoarse voice, "If you win, I'll tell you." Mercy glanced at Thea again, and the young lady made a hand gesture for her to do as she pleased. "All right." The secretary's words were concise and comprehensive. Then, she quickly kicked off her high heels, tore off her skirt, and took off her glasses. From stillness to movement, the whole process took less than a second. She flew up, and her legs were like two battle axes, directly hitting the man in black's head. "You're really good at fighting." The man in black raised his arm to block the kick, and then changed his block into a grab, trying to grab her ankle and throw her out. However, Miss Maisie, who could fight death knell to a draw, wasn't so easy to deal with. She twisted her waist in midair and changed her move, kicking the man in the head with a backhand kick. The man in black finally realized that he had underestimated his opponent, and hurriedly changed his move. Unfortunately, it was too late. He could only lean back to dodge the powerful kick, and at the same time, raise his leg to kick Maisie's lower abdomen. Maisie hit the floor with her left hand at the critical moment, and borrowed the force to dodge the attack. The two exchanged blows, and both of them had underestimated their opponent. It could be said that neither of them had the upper hand. "I really didn't expect a delicate secretary to be so powerful. Your secretary can take at least 10 moves from me. Little Thea, you really have a lot of talents under you." The man in black no longer spoke in a hoarse voice, and took off his hood. He had bright eyes, white teeth, long hair, and exuded a sharp aura. Thea didn't even raise her head, and continued reading her documents. "Big Sister Shiva, you're boasting again. See if you can win against Miss Maisie first." The person who came was naturally Madam Shiva, who had taught Thea for half a year. The two hadn't seen each other for 6 or 7 years. If it wasn't for old Ma and Shiva's teachings, it would have been extremely difficult for her to reach her current position. Thea had looked for Shiva a few times over the years, but it was as if the other party was deliberately avoiding her, and they never met again. It wasn't appropriate to use force to invite her, so it had been delayed until today. Shiva was like a sister to her, and taught her everything. She had always remembered this kindness in her heart. However, Shiva had a stubborn personality, and Thea had never found a good way to repay her. Now that the other party had come personally, it was no surprise that she needed her help with something. However, Shiva stopped outside the window for a while, and it didn't seem to be urgent. Shiva's biggest hobby was fighting with all kinds of martial arts masters. For a long time, she had made Batman suffer. Now, Miss Maisie definitely couldn't fight with her. No matter how skilled Shiva was in martial arts, she was still an ordinary person. It was humiliating for both of them to fight with her with a divine body. Miss Secretary was just right. She accompanied Luther all year round, and her reputation was unknown to the outside world. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a problem for her to be a martial artist with her skills. In addition, the green lamp had improved Miss Maisie's physique, so she could be used to fight with Shiva. The fact was similar to what she had guessed. Seeing that she had no intention to stop them, the two immediately started fighting again. In terms of physical fitness, Miss Maisie was slightly better, but unfortunately, the gap in experience was too big. No matter how good her fighting intuition was, she had been with Luther and Thea every day, and her fighting experience was fundamentally different from Shiva's, who fought 3 times a day. Even so, the secretary still relied on her strong physique and excellent battle instincts to fight against Shiva with all her might. She fought for more than 60 moves before she was kicked in the waist. Miss Shiva naturally didn't use any strength. She just gently brushed it, but the outcome was already decided. Miss Secretary really couldn't beat her, and she would lose if they continued fighting. Fortunately, she didn't have any sense of honor as a warrior. She put on her glasses and high heels again, and continued to gather the documents as if nothing had happened. "You have such a good fighting intuition, but you're doing these trivial things?" Miss Shiva looked regretful, and her face was full of a young girl. "Come and cook with me, look. These things are what I'm happy to do." Miss Secretary put on a professional vase smile again, as if the aggressive female warrior just now was not her. Chapter 637. Thea knocked on the table when she saw the look of pity on her face. "Sister, don't try to poach her in front of me. Mercy just wants to live a normal life. She won't walk the same path as you." This was true. After interacting with her for a long time, Sia had long discovered that the secretary was a very easy person to satisfy. She just wanted to live a stable life. She wasn't like Thea when she was learning martial arts, punching Darkseid and kicking God's father every day. She learned martial arts to protect herself because Luther was too good at courting death. How could she survive without a good fighter? Sigh. Madame Shiva seemed to have thought of her own troubles and sighed. Seeing that they seemed to have something to talk about, the secretary changed out of her dress and walked out with her cat-like steps. Madame Shiva, who had always been an orthodox martial artist, was depressed to see such an excellent martial arts prodigy being surrounded by daily trifles. Sister, what's the matter? As soon as the secretary left, Thea's expression immediately turned serious. Shiva scratched her face, as if she didn't know what to say. After a long time she said embarrassedly, I have a daughter. Did you know? Thea did know. Even her husband, David Kane, the world's top assassin, had information about her. She immediately understood why she was here. She sighed. Cassandra Kane, right? I have a rough understanding of her. Then do you have a way to cure her? Shiva asked with some hope. I can't say for sure if I don't see the patient, but I will do my best. It was rare for Madame Shiva to make such a serious promise. Shiva also felt her sincerity and nodded lightly. Originally, it was just a coincidence back then. The paths of their lives intersected for a short period of time, but now, it brought her new hope. She walked out without a word, and Thea could only follow her. The two walked through the streets and soon came to a bungalow. Madame Shiva pushed the door open and entered. Inside the room, a black-haired girl around 12 or 13 years old had already reacted when she pushed the door open. She held a dagger behind her back and hid among the debris. Her eyes were vigilant as she looked outside the door. This child was quite vigilant. Thea silently watched the mother and daughter communicate with hand signals. Not long after, Shiva indicated that she was done with the communication. Shiva, who had never asked anyone to cover her with a blanket even if the sky fell, was now full of nervousness. She seemed to be standing with her hands behind her back, but in fact, her fingers behind her back were clenched so tightly that they were creaking. When Thea wanted to check, she couldn't help but say, please. Thea and she looked at the little lowly. Even after Shiva's explanation, the other party still maintained a standing posture that could attack at any time. Her whole body was full of vigilance. Good child, come here. I'll help you take a look. There was a hint of charm in his voice, trying to lower the other party's wariness. She didn't expect that despite his young age, the other party's willpower would be so high that he would be able to resist her charm. However, Thea's powerful charm attribute made the other party relax a little. The black-haired lowly couldn't speak and slowly approached. Her bright eyes kept staring at Thea, watching her jade hand slowly grow bigger in her line of sight. She tried to attack several times, but was stopped by the other party's gentle gaze. Until the hand finally fell on her own head, the two of them, one big and one small, breathed a sigh of relief. How did this child teach her? Thea was really speechless to the mother and daughter. She was so charming that she almost couldn't suppress it. Would ordinary doctors dare to check her? Wouldn't ordinary doctors be directly stabbed to death? Fortunately, the most difficult step was passed. The two of them had a preliminary contact, and she began to inject her magic power to check. The other party couldn't bear the divine power, and the more inclusive and applicable magic power was very suitable for the current situation. The examination lasted for half an hour before Sia stopped and began to think with her elbows in her arms. The black-haired lowly named Cassandra Kane didn't suffer from any injury, but was born with a speech disorder. This defect wasn't obvious in infancy, which was why Shiva didn't look for her in the first few years. However, when she reached puberty, her physical fitness was strengthened, and the original defect was directly magnified, to the point where she couldn't speak now. Her vocal cords, trachea, and cartilage were all intact, but there was a small defect in her brain. This defect made it impossible for her to effectively recognize the signals transmitted by her vocal cords, so she couldn't speak normally. The general view in the world was that 9 out of 10 people were deaf and 9 out of 10 were mute. Many mutes couldn't speak because of problems with their hearing system. However, this little girl's hearing was completely fine, and even sharper than ordinary people. Her symptoms, according to modern science, were caused by genetic loss. She, who had mastered all the genetic knowledge of Krypton, could be said to be unmatched in the field of genetics. Using modern scientific methods, a simple addition to the genes, and then the brain damage, the black-haired lowly's speech function would be restored to normal. I have good news for you. I can completely cure it. It seemed that she thought a lot, but in fact, only a few seconds had passed. At this time, the patient and the patient's family members were suffering the most, so there was no need to deliberately pretend to be deep in thought. Hearing this, Shiva and the little lowly both breathed a sigh of relief. Just as Thea was about to take out the medical pod for treatment, she once again felt a slight tremor in the thread of fate. From my point of view, this child also has a new option? Thea tried to interpret the signal transmitted by fate and secretly thought about it. With her current intelligence, she quickly connected the dots, but she still needed to ask for the opinion of the person involved. Shiva saw her suddenly stop and hurriedly asked, "Any other questions?" "Sister Shiva, you are almost like my biological sister, so I won't hide it from you. Cassandra's current disease is very easy to treat. With only modern medical technology, I can restore her speech function in about a week, but now there is a better option in front of you." "What?" Shiva was too lazy to pretend to be an expert and asked a little anxiously. "Don't you reject supernatural abilities? Actually, Cassandra can benefit from this disaster and obtain a relatively powerful ability." Thea thought of Cassandra in the Battle of the Gods, the spirit princess of Troy. The two of them had the same name, and now their circumstances were similar. One's vocal cords had exploded, and the other was born unable to speak. Now, the strange fate of the two seemed to be showing signs of intersection because of her. Although the demigod was crippled, her innate talent had not completely disappeared. Taking out the imprint rooted in her soul could completely make up for the deficiency in the little lowly's genes. Like the original spirit princess, she definitely could not use her words to make the law, but at the mortal level, the ability of the spirit princess of speech combined with the little lowly's combat skills would be very powerful. However, Thea knew that Madame Shiva was a little against supernatural abilities. She was a pure warrior, and so was her daughter who wanted to take over her mantle. This decision was not easy for them to make. As for whether the demigod Cassandra was willing or not, it was not within the scope of consideration. With her reputation with Hera, it was not a problem to ask for a cripple. Cassandra, who was in prison, should be grateful if she could walk out of Mount Olympus alive. Shiva and her daughter were not righteous heroes, so it was easy to transplant someone else's ability. Now it was up to them to make a choice. Time passed by, and Shiva still could not make up her mind. What kind of ability? Like when you fought that monster in Metropolis on TV? Chapter 638. Thea quickly shook her head. Of course not. I'm not 100% sure that I can get the ability. It's the power of language. Looking at their expressions, Thea knew that they didn't understand. She could only continue to explain. I defeated an enemy a few days ago. Her name is also Cassandra. She paused. The black-haired lowly's attention was attracted when she heard that she had the same name. She's the princess of Troy in ancient mythology. She has the power of language. She can use language to confuse and control others. She can even kill enemies. Now that this ability has been destroyed, there should be some remnants in her body. I mean to give these remnants to your daughter. It's impossible to regain her original strength, but it's good to be a support in battle. Milady explained the whole process and the possible outcomes. After that, it was up to the mother and daughter. Madame Shiva couldn't help but hesitate. Deep in her heart, she actually rejected superpowers. Moreover, her daughter's combat talent and combat awareness were unparalleled. If she diverted her energy to superpowers, her dream of becoming the strongest martial artist would go down the drain. However, as a parent, she did not want to reject this kind of benefit that fell from the sky. She was not a fool. This kind of good thing was most likely due to her relationship with Sia in the past. Directly giving up her superpower and only returning to normal seemed to be a bit of a waste. The black-haired lowly was still young. She didn't have the long-cherished wish of becoming the strongest martial artist in the world. However, she didn't dare to make the decision herself. She looked at her mother with longing and anticipation. Seeing her daughter's expression, even if Madame Shiva's heart was made of steel, she still softened. She didn't care about the ability. She would just get it first. At most, she would urge her daughter not to use the ability and focus on martial arts. She thought to herself. I agree. Do you need us to prepare anything? Thea gave her a look that said, You're very wise. I'll be back soon. After saying that, she took a step and arrived at Mount Olympus. The mother and daughter looked at the sky-blue portal in amazement. Another round of sign language. Thea found Hera with familiarity. When the God King heard that she wanted to take Cassandra away, he let her go without hesitation. Cassandra was imprisoned by her in the dungeon, so it was definitely inappropriate to kill her. After all, she was Zeus's daughter, and it would be a waste of food if she didn't kill her. Hera was just worrying about how to deal with her. Now that he heard that Thea wanted to take Hermes away, he immediately let her go and asked if Hermes wanted it. If Hermes wanted it, he could give it to Hermes for free. Thea hurriedly refused. Hermes had been severely injured by Supergirl, and his half-undead body could slowly recover in the netherworld. But now that he was imprisoned in the god realm, how could he possibly recover? Wait for 10,000 years. When he saw the Soul Speaker again, he had to admit that she was miserable. She was lying alone in the stone prison. According to the Amazons guarding her, she was only awake for an hour a day. For the rest of the time, she was either sleeping or going crazy. The violent impact of the spiritual world not only took away her innate talent, but also most of her consciousness. When Thea entered the stone prison, the former princess of Troy was curled up in a corner of the stone prison with disheveled hair like an evil spirit. Revenge, revenge. After all, she was still a half-god, and her throat had already grown out. It was just that her voice was so unpleasant that it sounded like sawing wood, hoarse and ear-piercing. It was a stark contrast to the clear and bright voice of a lark back then. Poor fellow. Thea couldn't help but sigh. Even in such a miserable state, she still couldn't forget about revenge. She probably didn't know that her eldest son, whom she had high hopes for, had already been forcefully brainwashed. I'll take her away. Thea showed the guard Hera's order, and directly knocked Cassandra out with a mental attack, and teleported her back to Earth. The trip back and forth took only 5 minutes. Shiva and her daughter were still making hand gestures when Cassandra jumped out again. Shiva only felt that it was magical, but the black-haired lowly was full of anticipation. Judging from this beautiful big sister's words, she could also become a superpower user? A half-grown child was now looking forward to superpowers. Compared to the countless hardships of martial arts training, superpowers were actually more tempting for someone of her age. If it were a righteous person like Batman, they would definitely strongly object to taking the enemy's power and adding it to themselves. Shiva and her daughter didn't have this problem. They had killed at least 800 if not 1,000 people. They didn't have any moral concerns at all, and calmly waited for a pie to fall from the sky. At this moment, Thea was communicating with divine power to create a small pie for the black-haired lowly. Cassandra's talent definitely couldn't be extracted under normal circumstances. The talent and the body were inseparable. However, now that she was in a crippled state, the remnants of the spirit of speech in her body had been spontaneously gathering. This was all done unconsciously by the spirit of speech, but the key factor was missing, which proved that this was completely useless. Without the participation of the power of rules to supplement her, Cassandra would be like this for the rest of her life. At first, Thea wanted to forcefully extract it, but after checking the situation in her body, she changed her mind. The remnants of the spirit of speech had spontaneously gathered, so there was no need for her to forcefully extract it. That would be too violent. After all, this was one of Zeus's thousands of daughters, so it was best for her to be gentle. When the mother and daughter couldn't see, and Cassandra was in a muddled mental world, she forcefully made a deal with her. She promised to restore her health, and the other party would use the remnants of the spirit of speech as a reward. She extracted a ball of light red light from Cassandra's body. The light was faintly discernible and extremely unstable, as if it would explode at any moment. Next, Thea pointed at Cassandra's forehead and used the willpower in her order scale to help her regain her consciousness. After that, she used 3 powerful healing spells in a row. Finally, after thinking about it, she added a large ball of pity. It was better to give up on hatred. Seeing that she had completed the deal, the ball of light red light gradually quieted down. They already knew that they were about to leave the main body, and a trace of sadness slowly emerged from within. Thea waved at the black-haired lowly, indicating for her to come over. No one was retarded. The black-haired lowly looked at the unknown substance in her hand and naturally knew what it meant. Her little face twitched, and her teeth bit her lower lip as she quickly walked in front of her. Don't be afraid, it will be over soon. It won't hurt at all. Milady talked nonsense as if coaxing a child. Actually, She didn't know if it hurt or not. It was her first time doing this, but in order to relieve the little girl's pressure, she pretended to be familiar with it. She directly swung her hand and slapped the ball of red light into the black-haired Loli's body. Then, she used magic to communicate with both sides, and used willpower to create a channel to slowly graft. Thea seemed to be performing a surgical operation, transferring the remnants of the body into the new body, and the remnants of the soul into the new soul. The black-haired Loli was instantly stunned by the influx of mental power. Milady signaled to Shiva that everything was normal and began to get busy. Chapter 639. It was easy to destroy, but hard to build. This was true everywhere. It was even more difficult to create a new talent based on the original incomplete foundation. Fortunately, she was already a god, and her intelligence attribute was extremely high. Trade and language were similar, so most of the remnants of the spirit of speech in Cassandra's body could be recognized. Demigods also had a human part, and this part was extremely easy to distinguish. It took some thinking to distinguish the part that belonged to the gods. Thea's original wild demigod state was slightly different from the Greek demigods, but she had Diana, a human sample, as a comparison. In any case, they had the same father, so the difference wasn't too big. First, she identified the human part and integrated it into the soul of the black-haired Loli. Then, she compared it with Diana to find the similarities with Zeus's part. It had to be said that Zeus's eldest brother's bloodline was very powerful. The black-haired Loli, who was only considered beautiful among ordinary people, would become extremely beautiful in the future after integrating a little of Zeus's bloodline. Finally, she carried out the talent planning. As if sensing the black-haired Loli's natural deficiency, the remaining light of Cassandra's talent automatically filled in. Thea directly added new functions on the original foundation. All kinds of energy were integrated into the black-haired Loli's body. This process was actually a learning process for Thea. After working for an hour, it was the first time she had done such a grafting operation on the soul level. The light red light was divided into thin threads invisible to the naked eye, and wrapped around the black-haired Loli's transparent ordinary soul. Apart from the names, it could be said that the two people in the original time and space were connected by her. One was a spirit of speech and the other was a mute. This was the magic of fate. With a small part of the abilities of the spirit of speech, the future Cassandra would go higher and further than in the original time and space. "How is it?" Madame Shiva asked worriedly. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." Milady patted her chest and promised. Shiva glanced at her and didn't say anything. She began to wait quietly. As for Princess Cassandra, whose talent had completely disappeared, it didn't take long for her to wake up. Thea had no relationship with her at all, so there was no need to talk nonsense with her. She directly teleported her away and arranged for her subordinates to take care of her. She was no longer a demigod after losing all of her powers. Without the influence of hatred, perhaps it would be a kind of happiness for her to find a place to live out the rest of her mortal life? After sending Cassandra away, Thea and Madame Shiva began to wait for a long time. They waited for 2 days. Looking at Madame Shiva's anxious look, Milady could only wait. She was afraid that something would happen to Moira, so she sent a doppelganger to protect her mother. 2 days later, Cassandra woke up. She was well trained and didn't show any signs of panic. She just looked around strangely. Thea checked his body and found that it was still okay. The soul fusion was very successful, and his physical fitness had been greatly improved. Conservatively speaking, he should have no problem living for 150 years. He coughed lightly and said to the black-haired Loli, "You felt it yourself. The spirit of speech is a very powerful force. According to your logic, it's a weapon. When you use it to kill your enemy, you have to pay the price. In order to prevent you from misusing it, I have added 2 locks in the depths of your soul. One lock will be completely unlocked when you become an adult, and the other lock will be restricted. Now you can speak normally, but I suggest that you speak less. When your spirit of speech accumulates and is activated in battle, your enemy will be smashed to pieces by the power of your words." Thea clenched her fist as she spoke to strengthen her tone. This principle was designed by her through Diana's guardian silver bracelet. After all, the black-haired Loli was not a genuine user of the spirit of speech. Naturally, she couldn't compare to Cassandra. If she could walk the path of accumulation, then the power she could unleash would really be able to topple mountains and overturn seas. However, considering that she was not Diana, and her physical fitness was only slightly stronger than ordinary people, Long-term accumulation would be a huge burden on the body. The ability that Thea designed was that she could speak normally, but she needed to speak less. After a long speech, the black-haired lowly would not be able to speak anymore. Thank. The black-haired lowly was still a little inarticulate, but this was because she hadn't spoken for the past few years. With her hard work and a little practice, she would be able to return to normal. Thea stretched out her finger and tapped on the lowly's forehead, inputting a message. I'm not good at using the power of the spirit of speech. The backlash is a little too much for you. I'll teach you a few ways to reduce the backlash and allow you to use this power normally. 3 spell-like abilities. The power of speech. Silence. This can be used in many situations. The power of speech. Shield, a defensive spell. The last power of speech. Pain, an offensive spell. You can use these 3 abilities once a day. Do you remember? Thea rubbed the black-haired lowly's little head. Originally, she would explode when someone approached her, but now, she was not used to being touched so intimately. Superpower. The message passed through her mind allowed her to instantly grasp how to use it. The more the black-haired lowly looked at this beautiful sister, the more she felt close to Thea. Now, other than her mother, Thea was her second closest relative. As for her father, there was no need to mention him. Looking at her mother with great interest, Madame Shiva immediately understood her intentions. She happily waved at her daughter. Come and try it. The method of communication between mother and daughter was to fight first. After 6 or 7 moves, when Shiva's kick was about to hit her daughter, the black-haired lowly softly spat out the word, shield. A transparent air wall that was 1 meter tall and half a meter wide suddenly appeared between the two of them. Shiva's leg directly kicked the air wall. The air wall could not withstand her strength at all and instantly shattered. However, this obstruction reduced the strength of her leg by more than half. She could only withdraw her leg and change her move. The black-haired lowly took the opportunity to regroup and continue the fight. Interesting. Will this ability be strengthened in the future? She naturally asked the young lady who was watching the show. Of course, I just provided her with a few application models. This is the wisdom of the predecessors. If she can innovate, then the effect will be even stronger. Thea's words were not false. She had now opened a back door from the new creation planet's weave and added the black-haired lowly. Otherwise it would not be so easy to use in battle. Cassandra had used it for thousands of years, but she could only talk on the sidelines and did not dare to use it in battle. It was because the backlash of the magic was too great. Now that the black-haired lowly's backlash had been transferred to the new Protoss, who were in the tens of millions, the backlash had been distributed to an undetectable extent. She just needed to break away from the original restrictions of the spell and make it her own. That would require her to work hard. Hearing that there was still potential in the future, both mother and daughter were very excited. Chapter 640. The black-haired lowly continued to exchange more than 10 blows with her mother. She took some time to try the word, pain. Lady Shiva, who was caught off guard, staggered from the sudden pain. Her movements were distorted and the black-haired lowly landed a palm strike on her ribs. The mother and daughter soon finished their sparring. The black-haired lowly stood aside while trying to hold back her laughter. Just by looking at her face, one could tell that this lowly was very excited. Although it was a sneak attack and her mother was not serious, it was still Shiva, who was known as the best martial artist in the world. This ability is indeed powerful when used unexpectedly. Miss Shiva nodded affirmatively. Okay, I'll have to trouble you this time, little Thea. Thank you for your help. Miss Shiva did not say much and was ready to leave. Thea did not know what to say to this girl who was like the wind. She wanted to ask her to stay for a few more days, but she knew that she might not agree. She could only avoid it. How do you plan for Cassandra's future? Shiva, who was about to pack her things, stopped and thought for a long time. Finally, she said, originally, your place was a good choice. Unfortunately, your family is too famous now. Help me send her to Batman. Don't be like me. She should be a good person. I'll leave it all to you. After saying that, Miss Shiva looked at Thea seriously. Her place was indeed not a good choice. The media was really everywhere. If there was suddenly a child in the family, it would cause a lot of trouble. Batman was a good place to go. Thea did not think too much and nodded in agreement. Shiva touched Cassandra's head and put her forehead on the black-haired lowly's forehead. She closed her eyes and thought for a long time. Without saying a word, she turned around and left the room with her luggage. Your mother is a strong person. Thea comforted Cassandra in a low voice. The little girl stared at the figure that was getting farther and farther away, and did not speak for a long time. Sia couldn't understand Lady Shiva's mentality of gently letting go of her restraints and wholeheartedly pursuing the strongest, nor would she do such a thing. This kind of behavior couldn't be considered noble, but it was definitely worthy of being powerful. Compared to those who would forget themselves after obtaining special abilities, Madame Shiva's spirit was as pure as gold. The black-haired lowly seemed to be used to her mother's disappearance. She was very independent and quickly adjusted her mood. Knowing that she was going to a new place, she quickly packed her backpack and carefully grabbed Thea's clothes. Hold on to me. We're going to a dark cave later. Thea grabbed the lowly's shoulder and activated a teleportation spell. However, something unexpected happened. When she was at the end of the teleportation, she found that an obscure energy had interfered with the teleportation coordinates. They did not enter the Batcave but went outside. The black-haired lowly looked at her silently. What happened to the dark cave? Thea closed her eyes and gritted her teeth angrily. She felt that there must be a mark on her forehead right now. What kind of black technology did Batman invent this time? It could actually interfere with her teleportation. She couldn't understand how technology could be used to stop teleportation. Batman's technology was at least 1,000 years ahead of Earth's. This method was undoubtedly designed to deal with her. She was speechless. Fortunately, the deviation wasn't too big. She still remembered the direction of the Batcave and pulled the big lowly Cassandra to the other side. After a few twists and turns, they pushed open a certain mechanism and walked down the spiral staircase into the cave. The two people in the Batcave heard the commotion and hurriedly ran out. Sia recognized them at a glance. Dick, Barbara, long time no see. Naturally, they were Nightwing and Batwoman. However, their expressions were unnatural. Nightwing Dick's expression was a little gloomy. Thea, are you here to look for Batman? Yes. Thea was confused. Isn't this nonsense? I can't run into the Batcave to look for Superman, right? Nightwing and Barbara looked at each other and answered bitterly. He's a little busy now. You'll know when you come in with us. Your acquaintance is also here. My acquaintance? My acquaintances are everywhere. God knows who you're talking about. The outside of the cave was covered with a layer of lead. Her supervision couldn't see what was inside at all. She could only follow the two slowly inside. On the way, they introduced Cassandra because Thea remembered that she would become the third-generation Batwoman in the future, so she should be compatible with the Batcave. Neither of them could make the decision and could only express a limited welcome. After entering the depths of the cave, Thea saw her acquaintance at a glance. Her brother, Green Arrow Oliver, was here. Standing next to her brother with a strange expression was the Ninja Master's youngest daughter, square-faced Nisha. The Ninja Master was waving his arms and saying something. Batman, who was also wearing a mask and a bat suit, was arguing with the old man with a gloomy face. A tall woman stood outside the group. It was Talia, whom Thea hadn't seen in a long time. F***CK, something big is going to happen. Such a thought popped up in Thea's mind. It was a pity that teleportation was blocked here. Otherwise, she would definitely pull Diana over to watch the show. The five of them formed a small circle and were having a heated discussion. In fact, they had all seen Thea, but they didn't have time to talk to her. Only Oliver waved at her awkwardly. What's going on? Thea was very curious. She was going to ask someone who knew what was going on. Nightwing and Barbara were very tight-lipped. She might as well ask Oliver. On the other side, Thea wasn't familiar with the third-generation Robin. Catwoman was holding a small knife and cutting there. She didn't look like the best person to talk to. Hey, Damien. Why didn't you say hello when you saw your sister? Thea pulled the big lowly Cassandra and sat down next to Damien. The child was now 10 years old and looked a little like a teenager. When Thea walked to him, he was sitting alone on the steps, looking at the five people arguing below. Oh! Damien greeted her listlessly and continued to look at the guys below. What are these guys doing? Tell me. Thea asked with a smile. Damien pursed his lips. He didn't want to say it, but the trauma of his childhood was still there. In the end, he told her everything that had happened. The matter was very complicated. This space-time ninja master had lost his power too early. He didn't deal with Green Arrow as violently as he did in the original space-time. Instead, he used a soft strategy to defeat the hard. One day, when he earnestly suggested that he wanted to take back the League of Assassins, Oliver hesitated for a long time before agreeing to it. However, Oliver wasn't an idiot. He couldn't kill his way into Nandarbat alone. Thanks to Thea, he knew Bruce and Damien. When they reached the Bat Cave, the two of them discussed and decided to trick Damien's mother back. Chapter 641. After that, things started to get complicated. Talia was indeed tricked back, but the Ninja Master suddenly jumped out and said that Oliver should accept the position of the leader of the Assassin League and marry his little daughter to him. With the old man as the bridge, the relationship was twisted together. This time and Space Ninja Master was really good to Oliver. He taught him all his skills, and now that he only had a few years left to live, he was acting pitiful and gaining sympathy. In the face of his last wish, Oliver really couldn't say no. Before Thea came in, the few of them talked awkwardly for half an hour and still couldn't come up with anything. Talia was naturally strongly against it. She could give up the man, but she couldn't bear to give up the son. Square-faced Nisha was a lesbian herself. How could she get involved with Oliver? But she also knew that her father didn't have many years left to live, so she couldn't bear to say no. She was in the most awkward position right now. Batman had always thought that the Assassin League was bad, so he naturally couldn't let Green Arrow fall into it. He also strongly opposed it. Not to mention Green Arrow. What Assassin League? I'm living well in Star City. Why would I go there? The Ninja Master was not as strong as he used to be. He just kept acting pitiful, making the two men speechless. Do you understand now? If your brother marries my aunt, we'll be relatives. Damien had been with Sia for a few years, and he could imitate her expressions perfectly. At this moment, he was squinting his eyes to express his displeasure. She scratched her head. She, Green Arrow, and Batman didn't have any good ideas. She wasn't afraid of the hard, but the soft. This was the case for her, Green Arrow, and Batman. His wife, son, and father-in-law were all mixed up in a mess. Even with Batman's explosive intelligence, he couldn't solve this problem. The Ninja Master seemed to have finally found the weakness of this group of heroes. He didn't wear his usual majestic long cloak. Now, his face was haggard, and he was dressed like an old man. He kept asking Green Arrow to inherit the Assassin League and promised that he wouldn't participate in the League's development. You can ask them to do good deeds every day. I don't have many days left to live anyway. To be honest, Green Arrow was a little tempted. If an organization could follow him and do good, he would be willing to do it even if he had to bear the infamy. Similarly, Batman thought the same. He had always thought highly of Oliver. If he could inherit the League of Assassins and lead this group of people to the path of good, Batman would definitely support him. Talia was the one who strongly objected. She even drew her sword and wanted to fight to the death with Oliver. Of course, Oliver couldn't fight her. Whether it was Batman or Damien, it was impossible for him to injure or kill her. He directly rejected the request for a duel. The Ninja Master didn't give up. He asked his two daughters to fight, and then he asked the two men to decide the winner. Nightwing, Third Robin, Barbara, Catwoman, Thea, Cassandra, and Damien. The seven of them were either leaning against the wall or sitting on the ground, watching the quarrel. In the end, Batman couldn't take it anymore and waved desperately at Thea. She didn't notice at first and thought that he was calling Damien. Later, she realized that he was calling her. However, when she thought about how this guy had specially installed anti-teleportation technology, she tilted her head to the side and pretended not to see. It was only when Oliver called out to her that she stood up awkwardly and slowly walked over to their side. She put her hands in her pockets and sized them up carefully. Even an upright official couldn't resolve a family dispute. What could she do? After listening to their pleas again, she frowned. The others didn't have much of a problem. The most important thing was the Ninja Master's attitude. This old guy looked weak now, but he was sincere to Batman and Oliver. This made the two superheroes unable to make up their minds. It was impossible to lock him up or kill him. The two superheroes weren't that ungrateful. Talia's attitude was also the problem. Thea lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then she pulled Batman and Oliver aside and asked, "The Ninja Master isn't a good person. You know that, right?" "Nonsense, who didn't know that?" Both of them nodded. If the old man can live longer, I think today's problem can be put aside and solved slowly in the future, Thea continued when she saw the slight change in their expressions. But this old man isn't a good person. Now it's your choice. Let the old man live or solve all the problems today. Then, she looked at Batman. She didn't need to worry about Oliver. His brother and the old man weren't so close that they would sacrifice everything. The key was still Batman. After his parents died tragically on the street, it could be said that the Ninja Master gave Batman the courage to overcome everything in his darkest period. Everyone knew that the old man wasn't a good person. However, no one saw Superman or the Flash run over to punch the old man. This was all because of Batman. To some extent, the Ninja Master was like a strict father to Bruce. He created the Batman of today. Without him, Bruce Wayne would never have reached the heights he had today. After falling out with Batman, the two fought several times, but neither of them gave the other a fatal blow. Batman could still use the principle of not killing to dodge, but the Ninja Master had also let Batman go several times. The relationship between them didn't break because of the different values of good and evil. Instead, it became closer. Thea now threw this choice to him. Back then, when she was a demigod, she couldn't do anything when facing the Ninja Master whose body had been corrupted by demons. Today it was different. She was still confident that she could let the old man live for another 30 or 40 years. Thea, do you really have a way? Seeing that Batman began to ponder, Oliver hurriedly pulled his sister aside and asked in a low voice. Of course, the young lady answered with certainty. What about Talia? Batman thought about it and still couldn't bear to let his father-in-law wait for death, so he asked a new question, what about Talia? Let's maintain the status quo. Under her leadership, the League of Assassins has now become much more low-key. Maybe this is a good thing. To be honest, Batman didn't like this kind of stalling method, but he didn't have a better way. He nodded sadly and agreed to this plan. Seeing that the superheroes had reached a consensus, she called the old man out again and told him her proposal. I can extend your life for a while, but the price is to let go of the League of Assassins. Can you do that? Hearing that his life could be extended, the Ninja Master's eyes narrowed. Didn't you say that I could only live for 10 years? There was no need to tell the old man about ascending to godhood. Thea didn't want to agitate the old man who wanted to live forever. She took out a colorless and transparent hourglass from the dimension ring and gestured to him. This is the collection of the Greek god, Thanatos. Miraculously, even though they were tricked badly, Thanatos and Hypnos, the two cold male gods, didn't know the truth of the matter. When they heard that Lady Sia's words were very important to Hera, they specially took out a bunch of treasures to make friends with her. This hourglass was one of the inconspicuous items in the big gift bag. Chapter 642. To the gods, it was insignificant and could only be used as a bonus, but to the Ninja Master, it was too precious. The only drawback was that it would contaminate the soul. After all, it was another person's lifespan. The consequences of soul contamination ranged from mental disorder to personality replacement. Thea really couldn't let ordinary people use it, but the Ninja Master who had long been contaminated by demons didn't have this concern. This hourglass contains a person's lifespan of 70 years. Your original demon physique will increase the burden on your lifespan, but it's still possible to extend your lifespan by 30 to 40 years. Thea noticed a flash of light in the Ninja Master's eyes and knew that he was tempted. Now there are two options in front of you, waiting for you to choose. Do you want to solve the problem of the Assassin League while everyone is here today, or take a step back to extend your lifespan? In fact, there was no need to guess to know the old man's real thoughts. The longer one lived, the more afraid of death, especially the Ninja Master. The truth was as Thea expected. He quickly made up his mind to get the lifespan first. The Assassin League could be put aside for 2 years. Anyway, the purpose of the Assassin League was to extend his lifespan, so he couldn't put the cart before the horse. Thea threw the hourglass to him. How do I use this thing? The old man looked at it for a long time. It didn't look like something to eat. You know the worship ceremony of the Greek gods, right? Thanatos needs your belief. As long as you believe in him and worship him from time to time, the quicksand will slowly enter your body and extend your lifespan. The Ninja Master was very satisfied. This method wasn't difficult. Although it was a bit strange for a Central Asian to believe in a Greek god, who cared about this in a life-and-death situation? The old man left the bat cave gracefully. A storm that was neither too big nor too small was finally resolved. Thea finally had time to introduce Cassandra to Batman. Whether it was for Shiva or Thea, he couldn't refuse. Batman happily took over the black-haired Loli's future teaching job. Thea sent the square-faced Nisha back to Star City, and the siblings continued to follow Moira around the country. Under the strict defense of several forces, Moira's final push ended perfectly. Now it was time to see the final vote. That morning, after Quinn's family had breakfast, the three of them went to the nearest polling place together. When the reporters who had been waiting for a long time saw the family of three get out of the car, they rushed towards them like crazy. "Ms. Quinn, how confident are you that you will be selected? Dr. Quinn, will you vote for your mother? Mr. Quinn, is there anything you want to tell the media about your relationship with Lance and her sister?" In order to appear more approachable, a large number of Moira's security personnel were dismissed by her. Today, she was voting as an ordinary citizen. The eldest miss also kept a low profile and did not bring anyone with her. However, the wall of human flesh that she used to have was no longer there. She could not send a mental attack into the crowd, so she was a little speechless as she was surrounded by a tide of reporters. As a man, Oliver could only rely on himself to separate the crowd and let the two women enter the voting booth. The tabloid reporters at the entrance could be ignored, but the large media inside the polling station had to be dealt with carefully. The three of them got their votes. This was not the time to be modest. The other candidate ignored them and the three of them chose Moira. They each filled in the form and showed it to the media. Only then did the procedure was completed. The integrity of the media in the polling station was quite high. They did not pay attention to the gossip, but focused on Moira's governance after that. Moira did not hold back and described the benefits of electing her as the president. In short, if they did not elect her, they would suffer a big loss. When the other candidate was mentioned, she did not hold back and ridiculed the other party. She almost shouted at the camera that the other party was a fool. This was very interesting. At the beginning of the election, when the two candidates mentioned each other, they were all polite words, such as respectable opponents, extraordinary politicians, and so on. However, when Moira began to take the lead, everything changed. Both sides adjusted their strategies almost at the same time, which was to belittle the other party and elevate themselves. The TV debate still needed to maintain some dignity. Now that the dust had settled, there was no need to hold back. Moira ridiculed the other party's governance strategy and fashion sense. It turned out that the other party did not show any mercy. When the family of three returned to the old house, they turned on the TV and saw that the other party was also scolding their own clothing. Since Moira's main theme was the superhero card, the other candidate went all out. In his opinion, the superhero could not do anything to him. He completely disregarded life and death. He ridiculed several superheroes, focusing on how Superman's blue tights and red cloak did not match and how terrible the color combination was. Thea could only say sorry to Superman for being caught in the crossfire. Presumably, the good-tempered Superman would not mind. The whole day of voting was noisy. All kinds of rumors were flying and the whole country was jubilant as if it was a festival. The family of three did not go anywhere, but waited silently at home for the final results. Many of the aides kept sending back all kinds of news. The results of the vote count came out very quickly. Moira won a large number of votes and directly announced the victory of the election in front of the media surrounded by people. To officially enter the White House, they had to wait until January 20th of the next year. During the inauguration ceremony, they had to hold the Bible and take the oath of office to complete the whole process. There was still more than a month to 2 months before that. Thea used this time to personally arrange her mother's security. The teleportation gem was still the most important thing. Although Moira's physical fitness was much better than an ordinary old lady, she still could not withstand the shooting of a large-caliber weapon. Although she had learned some fighting skills like Taekwondo, the results were not worth mentioning. Thea found a few of Death Knell's subordinates who did not look so fierce and stuffed them into the security team. The Sky's Eye Association would also provide some protection. With this double insurance, she felt at ease. Moira flipped through the calendar every day, waiting to reach the peak of her life. Now the president in the White House, who was already a little nervous, was also flipping through the calendar. Anyone who wanted to come to this place could come. He did not want to stay a day longer. Thea took time out to meet Poseidon again. Amidst the ripples, she entered Poseidon's kingdom. A few giants who had fought side by side before led her into Poseidon's bedroom. He was waiting outside the door. After dismissing the irrelevant people, the two gods spoke a few words. Seeing that he was not happy, Thea immediately went to the main topic today. I can give you this staff, but... Poseidon did not mind such a straightforward request. If there was a need, it would be easy. If there was no need, it would be easy. A ton of meteoric iron. What do you think? Poseidon thought that he made a very high offer. Thea almost spat in his face. Meteoric iron? Wasn't that the remnants of meteorites that enter the atmosphere? I have as much of it as I want. If you want it, I can even give you a few planets. Thinking of the few pieces of precious meteoric iron in Hades' treasury, she was speechless. She did not touch any of those broken stones. They were the only things left in Hades' treasury. She shook her head, indicating that she did not want it. The essence of water? No. The horn of harvest. Our family is a high-tech business group. We don't farm, thank you. Poseidon gave several suggestions, some of which were inappropriate, some of which were completely useless. Modern society was rich in resources. What was the use of giving her a horn of harvest? How about this, Your Majesty? Open your treasury and let me choose any treasure. How about that? Thea finally revealed her foxtail. Chapter 643. Poseidon shook his head and refused. If you randomly picked and took the best one, I would suffer a huge loss. Thea realized his concern and sighed in her heart. There were too few opportunities to pick up scraps, and the opportunity to snatch by force was even more rare. She had to play her part this time. She summoned another trading slate and wrote clearly that the god of death staff would be exchanged for a treasure from Poseidon's treasury. The difference would be made up by her side. Oh, so you are the goddess of wealth. I didn't know. Poseidon was able to see through Thea's abilities with just one move. The Poseidon had always thought that Thea was a god in battle. You can't take my personal artifact. He made a request. Thea nodded and added it to the slate. Okay, come with me. Poseidon thought about it. The god of death staff was very important to him, and this deal was worth it. He led her to his treasury. She had already seen the treasury of two gods, and had to admit that the Poseidon's treasury was very different from the other two. Zeus's treasury was full of fine items, and he didn't care for the ordinary ones. Hades, on the other hand, had a big pot of everything. There were so many things that the two thieves, Sia and Diana, were so busy that they hadn't even finished sorting them out yet. Poseidon's treasury was just like him, willful and unrestrained. He didn't care for the ordinary ones, and he didn't care for those that didn't suit him. In short, he was very willful. His treasures were all related to his priesthood. Water treasures were the most, and fire and light treasures were the least. Most of his treasures advocated strength, and they made people feel peaceful. It was a very extreme and willful collection style. Thea couldn't look carefully because time was limited. She directly lit up the most valuable item in the room. She looked around and found that treasures like the thread of fate were really rare. Even the Emperor of the Underworld and the Poseidon didn't have such a level of collection. After turning around for a while, she finally found something good. A ball of blue flame was peacefully resting in the corner. Although this flame was not the most valuable thing in the room, it was relatively suitable for her. To be honest, Poseidon's treasure trove was a little disappointing. This guy was neither as comprehensive as Hades, nor as good as Zeus's. No wonder he had been second place for so many years. There were a few treasures that were good, but Thea had no use for them. However, this flame was different. Not only could it be added to the silver flame, but it was also an extremely valuable material for Diana to forge. After stretching his neck and searching for a long time, he finally confirmed that this was the flame. The flame collected by Amphitrite? Poseidon looked at the treasure that Amphitrite was holding and reminisced about the past. Thea didn't expect that this ball of flame was made by a famous person. If she remembered correctly, this Amphitrite was the wife of the Sea Emperor. Her style of doing things was similar to his elder brother, Hades. His wife was also snatched. This sea goddess had probably been sleeping in the god's kingdom for a long time now, and Thea had never seen her in person. The sadness of the Sea Emperor lasted at most half a second. Seeing that Thea didn't take his favorite treasures, the two happily completed the trade. The value of the god of death staff was relatively low. After all, it was only made by the demigod god of death. However, it was very useful to the Sea Emperor now, so it was an equivalent exchange. Holding the golden god of death staff in his hand, Poseidon secretly sighed and thought about his words. Goddess of wealth, where did you get this staff? If Thea still didn't know that he was related to the god of death, then she was too stupid. She described in detail the place where she got the staff that day, but she didn't mention the Sea King Arthur and the others. Poseidon didn't hear the answer he wanted. God of death? Is that what people call him now? What's his relationship with his majesty? Sia asked casually as she was curious. Poseidon thought for a while and decided to tell the truth. This was mainly because he saw that Thea's strength was outstanding, and she didn't have a close relationship with the Greek gods. Atlanta used to be my chosen, but he stole part of my power when I was sleeping. That bastard! Poseidon suppressed his anger and said in a cold tone. It suddenly dawned on Thea that everything made sense now. Atlanta was naturally the god of death. Just like how Thea was the moon goddess's chosen, he was of a higher rank and obtained the position of the Sea Emperor's chosen. This explained how he could survive until today. Ordinary Atlanteans had a longer lifespan than people on the surface, but it was impossible for them to live for more than 10,000 years. The god of death was the chosen of the Sea Emperor, and his lifespan was long enough. Listening to Poseidon, he even stole part of Poseidon's origin. This could be called powerful. You ruled the 7 seas. Didn't you find him? He shouldn't be a god, right? Thea was a little puzzled. The description in the comic was not clear enough, so she didn't know the true strength of the god of death. That thief is definitely not a god, but he is not in the sea. I am very sure of that. Looking at Poseidon's indignant expression, Thea was a little tempted. Of course, she was not indignant to seek justice for Poseidon, but she wanted to remove the god of death in advance. This guy used to be the first king of Atlantis, a great hero who had won many battles. Unfortunately, he was betrayed by his family. Determined to take revenge, he sank the continent of Atlantis. The more serious problem was that this guy had gone mad. It was hard to say whether he would jump out and cause trouble. Thea, who had been pushed to the edge by fate, had to get rid of him. Moreover, she wanted to see how the god of death stole the Sea Emperor's origin. After ascending to godhood, the increase in strength began to slow down. According to Thea's estimation, she was now a beginner divine power, while Darkseid and the Father must be high-level divine powers. She was 2 levels below the 2 big bosses. Maybe even more. At his current level, it was extremely difficult to take another step forward. Shah Zan's gift bag was still waiting for her to collect, but it was not advisable to directly absorb divine power like a demigod. The divine power was completely incompatible, and even if she absorbed it forcefully, it would dissipate quickly. When she was immortal, she only pursued quantity. When the quantity reached a certain level, it would lead to a qualitative change. Now that the qualitative change had been completed, it was not suitable to just accumulate quantity. To put it more broadly, the divine power of different gods could be mixed in the mortal stage, but when one reached the divine stage, the difference was huge. The divine power of wealth was completely incompatible with the divine power of earth and lightning. This problem was still troubling Thea. If she could see how the god of death intercepted the Sea Emperor's origin, perhaps it would be more helpful for her to absorb Shah Zan's divine power in the future? She immediately chatted with Poseidon for a while, saying that she had no clues, but if she saw the god of death, she would inform him. Only then did she leave Poseidon's kingdom. Chapter 644. She had to find the god of death no matter what. She wanted to see if the method he used to steal Poseidon's origin was useful. Poseidon's insistence on getting the staff back was probably to track him down. Thea returned to the metropolis and began to arrange her subordinates to search for the god of death. She remembered that this guy had been hiding in the ice mountains for thousands of years, but now even Poseidon could not find him. He must not be that simple. She guessed that the chances of the god of death hiding in a small plain were very high. This was also the main reason why Poseidon could not find him. After winning the election, Moira's task became even busier. Every day, there was an endless stream of people coming to visit the Quinn family's old house in Star City. Some recommended themselves for jobs, some talked about their scientific achievements in hopes of getting government support, and some talked about the international situation. There were all kinds of people who wanted to break down the door of the Quinn family's old house. Those who wanted to be officials were easy to deal with, but Moira could not deal with the people from the scientific community. She could only rely on her daughter to deal with them. To be honest, Thea was indeed knowledgeable. She had led mankind in climbing the tree of technology. She had dabbled in almost all the fields of modern applied science. It was just that she was not proficient in them, but after 2 days of dealing with them, she could not handle it. She had to use the fat old man in the firestorm as a scapegoat. He was a leading figure in nuclear physics and looked like a white-haired old scholar. He could handle most of the problems. All kinds of people dealt with them like a merry-go-round. After a month, it was Christmas Eve. There was no need to hold such a high-profile party this Christmas. Moira only prepared a small family gathering. Except for the grand banquet where celebrities gathered last year, this year's small gathering could be said to be Diana's first serious entry into Quinn's family circle. Today, the Valkyrie was dressed very modestly. Although she was not afraid of the cold in December, she still wore a beige wool coat, a knee-length skirt and boots. Aunt Moira, Merry Christmas. Diana bowed politely and gave a small gift. Diana, long time no see. Merry Christmas. Moira gave her a gentle hug to show her welcome. Olivier also brought Shadow to this family gathering. Diana was not familiar with them, but they knew each other. They could get together and chat. Moira left the young people chatting and went to entertain a few of her peers. There were still many relatives in the Quinn family. Although Robert Sr. had passed away 8 years ago, his siblings were still alive. Moira wasn't born out of a crack in a rock. She also had her own relatives. Now that she was about to move into the White House, many relatives came to support her. Even if it was a family gathering, there were still more than 30 people. The older generation gathered together to chat, while the younger generation naturally gathered around Thea and the others. The young mistress's beauty was simply unparalleled in the world. However, the few relatives did not dare to have any ideas about her. The law here was that cousins were allowed to. A billionaire, an academic giant, and a superhero title made most people flinch. They were just ordinary people and did not want to be captured by a group of aliens while walking on the street. A few of the young people were unconsciously attracted by Diana's heroic spirit and tried to show off their excellent side. The young mistress would not let their imagination run wild. Without a word, she pulled Diana's head over and kissed her lips. Diana was a little stunned at first, but soon understood and responded enthusiastically. The two of them showcased their affection on the spot, causing the relatives to sigh. Why would such a beautiful woman have such a relationship? What a waste! Although Thea's response was a little intense, they understood the whole story. They were wondering why a beauty like Diana would appear at the Quinn family's banquet. The truth made the young people feel miserable. Although there was a small episode, the Christmas banquet was very warm. The young people decorated the Christmas tree and hung the mistletoe. The young mistress, who was usually lazy, did not use magic today. She rolled up her sleeves and decorated with the others. The elders brought all kinds of food, including turkey, pudding, chocolate, and red wine for everyone to taste. From time to time, people dressed in Christmas robes and beard, dressed up as Santa Claus, came to congratulate the family. Moira gave everyone a gift. She did not put on airs, just like an ordinary housewife. There was a knock on the door. She could only open the door again. "Hey, Moira. Merry Christmas." A middle-aged man with an elegant appearance greeted her with a smile. Moira's expression changed slightly. She could not help but want to look into the house from the corner of her eyes, but she forced herself to hold back. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Merlin." Feeling the abnormality outside the door, Thea inadvertently took a look. She almost spat out the pudding in her mouth. Old Ma was here. Not only did he come alone, but he also brought his son, Tommy, and daughter-in-law, Laurel. It was not a big deal for the two families to celebrate Christmas together, but he even brought Xanadu's wife. It was already ridiculous for a goddess like Diana to celebrate Christmas, but now the youngest sister of the goddess of the lake also came to celebrate Christmas? Would that wooden god be able to withstand it? While Thea was stunned, Old Ma had already entered Quinn's old house with his girlfriend and son. This guy was indeed here for Christmas. Seeing that Malcolm and his family were obviously not here to cause trouble, Moira also let down her guard. She chatted with Xanadu, half to test the situation and half to build a relationship. Today, Xanadu's wife had obviously made some preparations. She put away her ethereal temperament, just like when Thea first met her 100 years ago. She was graceful and elegant, and her speech was extraordinary. Even in front of Moira, who was already the leader of a country, she was not inferior. "Who is that woman?" Tommy pulled Laurel to the side of the young people. Oliver asked in a low voice. He was naturally referring to Xanadu's wife. "Yes. She's my dad's new girlfriend." Tommy was a little embarrassed. His dad had disappeared for several years. Now that he jumped out, it was unexpected. Oliver looked at her seriously. "This woman seems to be very powerful. She's not an enemy, is she?" After that, he looked at his sister and Diana. In Oliver's view of the world, it was always right to ask his sister about these strange things and people. When Thea was hesitating whether to say it or not, Diana directly sold her out. "Thea knows best. They have some history." Milady looked back at her as if she was a traitor. She quietly set up a small enchantment and explained to them, "She's Xanadu's wife, the youngest sister of the goddess of the lake in Celtic mythology. As for my history with her, it's because my sword is the sword of the lake." This is what Diana is referring to. The Valkyrie shrank her neck. She forgot that Thea's Merlin bloodline could not be exposed. Fortunately, Milady covered it up. Chapter 645. The story of the sword in the lake, King Arthur and the goddess of the lake, was known to everyone here. Even Shadow had heard of it before. Their mouths were wide open as they tried to digest the news. Oliver and Shadow didn't care about it, so they just treated it as a story. Tommy and Laurel, on the other hand, had a hard time. Fortunately, they were experienced and knowledgeable. Diana was a living example, so they weren't too surprised. They were just scratching their heads about how to deal with their relationship in the future. With 4 more people, the Christmas party went on as usual. Everything was peaceful and no accidents happened. The young people agreed to go out for a walk. Malcolm and Madame Xanadu also got up and left. Old Ma, Oliver, and Tommy walked in front. The women were a step behind. Madame Xanadu looked at Thea carefully for a while and sighed. "Have you come this far?" How far had she come? Laurel and Shadow were full of questions, but they wisely didn't ask. "I was lucky, but the road ahead is getting harder and harder." Thea's relationship with Xanadu had always been neutral. In the past, they were simply seniors and juniors. Now they had become seniors and juniors. Madame Xanadu wasn't angry that she was surpassed by her juniors. Her expression was still indifferent. "Fate has shown me that the path you're on is completely correct. Don't be afraid, don't hesitate. Follow your heart and persevere." The group walked to a crossroad. Malcolm and Xanadu parted ways with them. Thea didn't say a word to Old Ma. They didn't even look at each other, but they understood each other's thoughts. Oliver, Tommy, and Laurel weren't devout believers. Shadow was from an indescribable country. Thea and Diana were even worse. It was torture for them to go to church. They decided that the night was long and they couldn't sleep. They might as well go and fight criminals for fun. Returning to her old base, Thea had a lot of feelings. Felicity and Ray Palmer were now together. They had a good chance of becoming a couple. She had already left this place and was heading for a wider world. Perhaps Star City's public security was too good. Or perhaps the criminals had a premonition that there would be a disaster tonight. The 6 of them guarded the communication channel for a long time, but none of them called the police. "Let's have a contest," suggested Oliver. Everyone had nothing better to do, so they all agreed. After agreeing with everyone's opinions, they decided to compete in archery. Green Arrow Girl, and Black Arrow all relied on their bows to survive, not to mention Thea. Diana also knew how to shoot arrows. Back then, Antiope had taught her for a long time, but she preferred close combat and did not usually use a bow. It was worth mentioning that Laurel had also learned archery. The Green Arrow Party was now a veritable shooting club. There wasn't a single member who couldn't shoot. Everyone displayed their skills. Thea and Diana also suppressed themselves to the level of an ordinary person. They only competed with their archery skills, which instantly highlighted Oliver's strength. Even if Thea and Diana used all their archery skills, they still couldn't surpass him. This was Oliver's talent. They played around until 3 o'clock, and then went home. Diana officially moved into Quinn's old house. The election was over, and this kind of private life could not shake Moira's position at all. It could even help her share the political pressure, so she was very calm. "Is this your adoptive father?" The two girls took a shower and changed into their pajamas, lying on the bed. Thea showed Diana her childhood photos. While looking through the photos, Diana pointed to one of the photos and asked. Thea was only 6 or 7 years old in the photo, riding on the neck of a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man was Robert Quinn, who died in the shipwreck of the Gold Quinn. That was where everything began. Thea looked at the photo and was also immersed in her memories. It was in Hawaii. At that time he was fishing. I pestered my father and rode on his neck. Haven't you thought about resurrecting him? Diana hesitated for a while, but still asked the question that had been on her mind for a long time. Thea was silent. Recently, she never got tired of giving others choices every day. Only when the choice fell on her did she realize the dilemma. Although resurrection methods were rare, it was not impossible. Whether it was Hera or the Heavenly Father, they both had some. As long as she made a deal, they would give it to her. But what about after the resurrection? The Gold Quinn was sunk by Malcolm. Old Malcolm really treated her well. What should she do then? Watch her biological father and adoptive father fight, and the white knife enters and the red knife comes out? Besides, Moira's attitude and Oliver's thoughts also needed to be considered. They all knew what she was capable of now, but no one mentioned resurrecting Robert Quinn. It was more of a dilemma. Thea silently stroked Robert Quinn's photo. The mistake of her father's generation had been made. What should she do? In order to stop all this from happening, should she go back to the past and cause a big incident like Thea's version of the Flashpoint? That would be interesting. If Robert Quinn knew that he had caused a multiverse-level disaster, he would not be willing. He would rather die with a smile. Thea was sure of that. Diana kissed her on the forehead, and Sia lay down in her arms. The two of them didn't have any sparring, but just hugged each other quietly until dawn. Thea did not make up her mind in the end. Just like Batman chose to indulge the ninja master, she chose to be an ostrich and drag on to maintain the status quo. Another month passed quickly, and it was finally the day of the swearing-in. Early in the morning of January 20th, the family of 3 was dragged to the church for a worship ceremony. Moira was serious and solemn, while Oliver and Thea were a little more casual. At least this wooden god was not worthy of the goddess of wealth. After that, the former president accompanied the current president to Capitol Hill. Thea certainly could not hold the holy sword on such a day. She wore a quilt. She wore a blue dress, carried a handbag, and wore a pair of 6-centimeter high heels. She wore a few simple accessories, and looked very low-key and simple. In truth, the dress was personally woven by Armani using divine threads. The high heels were made of dragon leather, and the heels were made of polished dragon teeth. The accessories were also part of Hades's collection. Any one of them was a quasi-divine artifact. She had now reached the point where she could casually waste precious materials without blushing. Dr. Quinn is getting more and more beautiful. The former president had never seen Oliver, but he knew Thea. Of course, in the past, Thea had never brought him any good news, so for a long time, it was a nightmare for the young lady to appear in the president's dreams. Today, the former president swept away his decadence, and his face was glowing. He walked with the wind as if there were springs in his shoes. Compared to Moira's serious face and his cheerful appearance, those who did not know the inside story would think that Moira was the former president and he was the current president. Chapter 646. Looking at the former president's energetic appearance, he did not look like he was going to Arkham for treatment as advertised by the media. The young lady awkwardly exchanged a few words with this old acquaintance, before the other party let her go and stood side by side with Moira. Ms. Moira Quinn, are you willing to serve as the President of the United States? When everything was set up, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court asked loudly. Moira put her hand on the Bible in front of her. Strengthened twice by her daughter, her voice was loud and did not sound like a middle-aged woman at all. I solemnly swear that I will faithfully carry out the duties of the President of the United States and do my best to abide by, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. After the routine procedure, there was a warm applause. Thea also happily clapped twice. After that, the former president was sent off and the new president began his first policy speech. In fact, it was all routine and cliché. Before the election, Moira had repeated the same words hundreds of times, but she still had to go through the process. She also talked about eliminating poverty, protecting the rights of women and children, increasing employment, vigorously developing the economy, and so on. The elites in the audience had to pretend that it was the first time they heard it. They all pretended to be very moved and responded with warm applause. The vice president had been sworn in front of the president. He was also Thea's old acquaintance, the former Minister of Defense, General Swanwick. This black general had officially retired from politics and was now Moira's deputy. After several internal games, the position of Minister of Defense was handed over to Clark's father-in-law, General Ryan. They just had to wait for Moira to take office and go through the nomination process. Analysts agreed that the combination of a president with a huge financial group background and a vice president with a military background would be more executive and inclusive than the previous government. After the speech, it was time for the inauguration luncheon. Many guests had been standing under the sun for half a day. Some of the older guests were so tired that they were about to collapse. They took the opportunity to rest for a while and eat a simple meal. Most of the guests were greeting each other. After all, the men were still fine, but many of the female guests were dressed so tightly that they couldn't even sit properly. What a joke! The young lady did not care. Even if she ate a dragon, her stomach would not have any abnormalities. However, she could not give up on her manners. She could not eat a drumstick. She also had to pretend to be a lady and wait with Oliver on the side. The banquet proceeded very quickly. Formalism was everywhere, and it was the same here. The luncheon almost ended right on time. A group of people walked out in an orderly manner. According to the procedure, it was the presidential inauguration parade. The motorcade circled along Pennsylvania Avenue, and finally, the president went up to the viewing platform of the White House to watch. The parade was made up of the honor guards of the 3 armed forces, civic groups, and various floats. Finally, there was an inaugural ball, and the event finally came to an end. Ayo! I'm so tired. The young lady felt that today was even more tiring than the battle with the eldest son. She threw herself onto the big bed in the White House, exhausted. For the next 8 years, she would have a bedroom here if nothing unexpected happened. This was the only reward she had gained after several months of hard work. She was so tired that Oliver and Moira were not much better off than her. The whole family had gone to bed early. Early the next morning, Thea was awakened by the noise. Just as she was about to cast a chain lightning to kill the flies, she finally realized that she was in the White House. She awkwardly put away her magic and observed the people outside. She changed into casual clothes and walked out leisurely. The breakfast in the White House was very simple. The waiter brought her a small plate, a few slices of bread, a few pieces of bacon, a palm-sized pancake, and a glass of milk. This was the breakfast for the day. Thea did not care whether she ate it or not. She just thought it was funny. Those guys who protested every day about the luxurious life in the White House should really come and see. This breakfast was at most $10. According to this standard, how much money could they spend in 8 years? She quickly finished her breakfast. On the first day of the new president's term, there was a routine press conference. Thea dressed herself as quickly as possible and stood in front of the White House lawn. She narrowed her eyes and listened to the reporters asking all kinds of strange questions. Originally, she thought that this matter had nothing to do with her. She was thinking about the god of death. Suddenly, a reporter mentioned her name and quickly pulled her attention back to reality. Dr. Quinn, is it comfortable to live in the White House? Well, those with the title of Ph.D. must be addressed as doctor in public. The Missy had always praised herself for her persistence in the past. Otherwise, Miss Quinn would sound very low and inferior. For 8 generations of the Quinn family, she was the only one who had a Ph.D. So it was self-evident who the other party was asking. Of course, the Missy would not say that this was the smallest place she had ever lived. The White House was 73,000 square meters. It was not small, but compared to the properties under her name, it could only be said to be so-so. She cheekily praised the democratic system in the United States and expressed her yearning and excitement for the White House. Will you build a swimming pool in the White House? Sia glanced at him gently. Are you crazy? In his heart, he wondered if he should let the poison vine lady capture this guy and use him as fertilizer. No. May I ask if superheroes should disclose their identities and register with the government? Thea could not help but look sideways. Did you transmigrate from Marvel next door? Superhero Registration Act? You're going to cause trouble. She couldn't deal with this problem. I can tell you clearly that I won't. Why? Do the people have the right to know? the other party asked aggressively. Thea glanced at the scene. Oliver stood beside her. Diana and Bruce Wayne were also present today as celebrities. Superman used Clark Kent's alias to mingle with the reporters. The Martian hunter stood diagonally behind as a security guard. The Missy frowned slightly and sorted out her words. Ridiculous. Superheroes did not take a single cent from the government and risked their lives to help others. What if their identity is exposed and they are attacked by bad people? Who will be responsible if their families die because of this? The people have the right to know? When did the people have the right to control the life and death of others? Is it given by the Constitution or God? The Missy asked 3 questions in a row. Her voice was flat but her tone was cold. The other party was a little stunned. He did not expect Thea's words to be so sharp. However, he came prepared and changed his angle. The people may not have the right, but the government should. Thea's smile was very fake. Of course, her words were even more fake. The government personnel are also made up of the people. The senior government officials are actually ordinary people. They are just a group of people who serve the country and society. After 8 years, they will return to being ordinary people. Your premise is not correct. Chapter 647. The reporters at the scene laughed softly. Thea was definitely lying through her teeth. Were these government officials ordinary citizens? They were either executives of major consortiums or elites in various industries. They would only go to a higher position after leaving the White House. However, the mainstream of society thought that they were ordinary citizens. This was very interesting. The reporter knew that Thea was lying, but he was speechless. He could not deny the current mainstream values, but Thea kept talking about democracy. He did not know how to respond. Are you advocating a government without people? If superheroes need to be registered, then we have to abandon the existing system and remove the human factor. Mr. Reporter, are you suggesting that we use supercomputers to control all systems according to established procedures to restrain everyone? Thea was getting more and more excited. Wasn't she just spouting nonsense? The deity of trade was related to language. She was not afraid of debate. The other party was stunned by her ability to change the topic. When did I say that I wanted to build a robot government? Sensing the funny looks of the people around her, she returned to the crowd dejectedly and did not say anything else. After dealing with a few more strange questions, the reporter let her go and threw the questions to the slightly dull Oliver. After an hour, the 3 of them finally finished all the procedures. Oliver quickly left the White House without saying anything. Thea also pulled Diana to meet up with a few superheroes. They went to the place she named the Hall of Justice to discuss the problem. The people and the higher-ups are afraid of superheroes. Batman changed back into his bat suit and spoke first. Thea's identity had been completely exposed, and Diana did not care. Superman was in between what could be exposed and what could not be exposed. He and the Martian Manhunter were firmly against revealing their identities. He was very sensitive to the smell of conspiracy as he pondered about others every day. I think it should be under the premise of voluntary participation. It depends on the individual's opinion on whether or not to disclose their true identity. We should give the individual the right to choose, and not a veto. Superman was very keen on this theory that his father had taught him, the so-called right to choose. No, what if someone impulsively announces their identity and regrets it later? Batman flatly refused. Powerful gods and aliens like you can choose to go public, but human superheroes can't do that. We'll grow old, and one day, we won't be able to wear capes anymore. What will we do then? Thea immediately supported Batman. This was the value of ordinary superheroes. They were not gods on Earth and could not run faster than the speed of light. Every time they put on a cape and walked on the streets, they were risking their lives to do something. They could lose their lives in an accident or fall from several floors and be paralyzed for life. If they were to reveal their identities, it would be too dangerous. I generally support Batman, but Superman's opinion can also be adopted. Earth superheroes can hide it, but if they really can't help it, we shouldn't oppose it. Thea tried to mediate the opinions of the two, but unfortunately, Superman and Batman were very stubborn. Superman was determined to give the choice to the individual. According to his original words, they had no right to make decisions for others. Batman, on the other hand, had an attitude of, I'm very experienced. They will regret it in the future, so I must take precautions in advance. The young lady's opinion was relatively neutral. She felt that Superman was too idealistic, and Batman thought too much about the dark side. Neither was suitable. As a result, the two refuted her again and criticized her for swaying her position. After that, Diana and the Martian Manhunter also joined in the discussion, and the five of them argued endlessly. In the end, they could only temporarily put aside the dispute and wait for more superheroes to appear before discussing this issue. In the next few days, Moira officially entered her role and began to meet frequently with people from all walks of life. To put it nicely, it was to listen to the opinions of all parties. To put it bluntly, it was to argue with a bunch of people. Moira was busy for a whole week before she cleaned up the mess left by the former president and began to patrol within her authority. The first stop was the Ministry of Defense. General Ryan led a group of senior military officials to accompany her. Thea was quite familiar with the Pentagon, and now she also came to watch. Her future policy was also discussed with her mother. Moira was very appreciative of Thea's way of making the former president spend all his time on military affairs and incur infamy. After that, the current president vigorously developed the people's livelihood. After taking a cursory look at the mothership in the dock and the giant mechs that were still training in the military base, Moira expressed her approval. After that, they came to the second stop, the Heaven's Eye Society. "Is this the new mutant you recruited?" Thea pointed to a female warrior in a purple-red bodysuit and asked Amanda. Now, there were more and more mutants in the Heaven's Eye Society. Dr. Light and Dr. Mist were the best among them. Including the Suicide Squad, their number was really not small. Hee hee. Her code name is Black Orchid. Amanda smiled a little awkwardly. The role had changed, and now she didn't know whether to answer Thea's question or not. Thea glanced at the female warrior and snorted softly. "It's the product of human experiments. You added the green of all things and the red of all things into the same body at the same time. This is the only survivor, right?" After that, she shook her head gently and let go of the topic. At the same time, she also praised the black technology of the Heaven's Eye Society. The green of all things and the red of all things, such things that deviated from the rules, how did they coexist in the human body? The Heaven's Eye Society bases were all over the country, and Moira didn't have the time to check them one by one. She just listened to some reports and completed the established procedures. It was just that she finally proposed to visit the Black House. The Black House had always been under Steve's direct control, and even Amanda, who now controlled the Heaven's Eye Society, didn't infiltrate it. But fortunately, Steve was a really patriotic person. For the president's order, he chose to directly execute it. Thea also took her mother's arm and stepped into the Black House. Chaos. Turning on the indoor lights, looking at the room in front of them that was comparable to a small library, the few people who entered for the first time all had the same feeling. The young lady ignored the gazes of the few people and looked at her own collection. After looking at the treasure house of the three Zeus brothers, she only had one thought. This place was simply a garbage dump. All kinds of messy things were piled up together, and there must be some high-quality goods. For example, at first glance, she saw a golden helmet in the shape of a full golden bell, quietly placed in the corner. This was the sole manifestation of the god of order of the two rivers, Nabu. The person who wore the helmet could instantly merge with Nabu and become a powerful mage, and had a lot of abilities such as time travel, immunity to aging, and precognition of danger. It was recorded that there were a total of 8 people who had worn this helmet, and they all called themselves Dr. Fate. Chapter 648. Ridiculous. Thea scoffed at their self-title. What was the point of being possessed by a god, assimilating their form of existence and gaining unparalleled power in a short period of time? They couldn't even see themselves clearly, yet they gave themselves the code name of Fate. It was ridiculous. Using the short decades of human life experience and knowledge to understand a god that had existed for tens of thousands of years, she could only say that she should cherish it. This was a possession artifact. The only lucky thing was that God Nabu was kind. Otherwise, God Nabu could be resurrected with a body. Sia used her divine telekinesis to check the helmet. The other party's spirit body was still full of vitality. However, there was a limit to how strong the spirit power was. She forced herself into his spiritual world and found that this guy was not a bad guy. It was just that his understanding of the order was too narrow and did not match her position as the god of wealth. Thea retreated embarrassedly. She couldn't absorb this guy's divine power. Her personality and position were both neutral. There was a big gap between her and the order. It was worthless. She crossed out the helmet and continued to watch with her mother. The floor was full of junk. Whenever the people of the Sky's Eye Society found something strange, they would throw it into the room. They didn't know what it was for, so the only way was to pile it up. Divine power, magic power, wizard power, and even some power that Thea couldn't name filled this space. Merlin's robe, African tribal totems, voodoo altars, Native Americans hunting javelins, and she even saw the writings of some on Myoji. The Sky's Eye Society must have robbed these things, right? These things were relatively harmonious, but they were all placed outside by Steve. The content inside was even more unbearable. Colonel Steve Trevor. Can you tell me what this is? Thea pointed to a dried human head hanging on the shelf and asked Steve. Steve was quite serious. He took out his little notebook and flipped through it for a long time. It's the ancestral body of a small tribe called Kaka from Central Africa. Thea squinted at the body. It was horrifying just to look at it. Colonel Steve, this thing doesn't have a trace of magic wave. Take it out and burn it. Amanda responded with a sneer. She was happier than anyone to see Steve in trouble. He turned around and ordered his subordinates to deal with it. A few of his subordinates also felt that this thing was an eyesore hanging there. They all threw it into a bag with a look of disgust and prepared to take it out to deal with it. Thea originally didn't want to interfere, but seeing the mess here, she really couldn't bear it. For example, the head that had existed for hundreds of years was her ultimate outburst. What kind of lousy thing was it? It had been air-dried for hundreds of years. Even if it was thrown to a dog, the dog wouldn't eat it. Instead, it was hung up so conspicuously like a treasure. The Steve from 100 years ago was much more fun. However, she didn't make things too difficult for the Heaven's Eye Society. She would give her own suggestions regarding curses, and it was up to them whether they accepted them or not. Over the next few days, Moira began to tour various places. Considering that some places were indeed dangerous, Missy accompanied her to visit Belgrave Prison again. This prison on the Gulf of Mexico was surrounded by swamps, and the most notorious criminals in the United States were imprisoned here. 13,000 criminals were imprisoned here, and the prison guards all looked tough and well-equipped. The United States was very interesting. The result of the democratic system was a frighteningly high crime rate. 1 in 100 people in the country had been in prison. Prison culture was quite popular on a certain level. Prison Break and Shawshank's Redemption were all specialties formed by this unique culture. The mother and daughter followed the prison warden with a large number of guards. Defense Minister General Ryan and Heaven's Eye Society's Amanda also brought their own people to accompany and protect them. The prison warden was a black man with a fierce face and a tall figure. Thea didn't bother to look at him after a glance. This guy must have been greedy for money in this position. Strictly speaking, the main part of Belgrave Prison was underground. The criminals on the first floor were all ordinary people who had committed serious crimes. Once they entered the second level of the underground, there would be some capable and organized criminals. For example, Captain Lang Han, who Thea had dealt with before, and Bee Woman, who controlled the bee robots, were all imprisoned on this floor. On the fourth floor, which was the bottom floor, there were already many criminals with superpowers. Several elites of the Suicide Squad were imprisoned here in different areas. Some of the cells were specially modified for superpowers. Suicide Squad. Moira looked at the mission information of the Suicide Squad and was a little hesitant. She couldn't be blamed for thinking so. Amanda was simply too harsh on this group of people. She simply sent them to wherever they were needed. They entered and exited the most dangerous places and did the most dangerous jobs, and the reward was Amanda's empty promise of a reduced sentence. As for how long their original sentence was, no one knew. This was a little too much. Today, there were 5 members in the Suicide Squad. They were Death Archer, Clown Girl, Killer Crocodile, Revenge Demon, and Bronze Tiger, the Grandmaster of Combat who was defeated by Oliver in Star City a few days ago. Under Amanda's nervous gaze, Moira closed the document seriously. Treat them with respect. Don't give them a mission that will kill them. Black Skin Amanda immediately said that the leader was wise. She firmly supported her. Neither of them mentioned releasing these people. A lot of dirty work was not suitable to be left to the government, so these people could only do it. Moira looked at the general situation and was ready to go back. Thea gently squeezed her mother's hand and motioned for her to wait. She looked at Amanda with a smile and pointed to the ground. There's another floor below, right? You even put a layer of lead under the floor? Haha, I'm dying of laughter. Amanda immediately looked back at the prison warden. You pig, you're just making things worse. Unfortunately, the prison was still under the leadership of the Heaven's Eye Society. She could only force an explanation. The few criminals below are very strong and must be strictly guarded. She insisted that it was not to prevent them from looking around, but purely to prevent the criminals from escaping. There are stronger criminals? Moira, who was about to leave, suddenly became energetic. Her daughter was right beside her, so she was not afraid at all. She was just watching the fun. Amanda looked at Thea bitterly. The young lady smiled at her innocently. Mr. President, please come with me. But you must be careful. All the unrelated guards were dismissed, leaving only the mother and daughter, the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Defense. Including herself, there were a total of 5 people. They were very confident in the young lady's ability. If she could not withstand it, the security guards would die. Amanda led them to a wall. She performed pupil verification and keyed in a password. After 5 or 6 procedures, a spiral staircase appeared in front of them. As she walked, she introduced the few prisoners. They first came to a cell that was completely cast out of alloy. A burly man with gray skin, iron-like muscles, red eyes, black hair, and a face full of stubble was firmly fixed in the room. As if he heard the sound of the outside world, the man began to shout. Amanda, Fiercer only wants you dead. Fiercer only wants to strangle you with your intestines. His voice was so loud that it could be heard even through the thick metal cell. Amanda, who was an ordinary person without any superpowers, had a big heart. She looked normal as if she did not hear anything and introduced the man to them. This guy must be an alien. He can understand our language, but communication is not smooth. He acted recklessly on the streets of Philadelphia and then resisted arrest. We chased him 19 times in a row before we finally mixed nanobombs in his food and finally subdued him. Chapter 649. Amanda continued, It's worth mentioning that his self-healing ability is terrifyingly strong. His body was blown up from the inside by the bomb, but he recovered in less than 10 minutes. This guy should be under the supervision of the Alien Management Committee, right? Thea looked at Amanda indifferently. Black Panther's expression didn't change. He just smiled in return. Missy glared at him and didn't pursue the matter. She observed him closely. Violent Wolf Rob, the arrogant guy who called himself the only macho man, was a very famous bounty hunter in the universe. It was just his bad luck that he came to Earth. This guy couldn't be steamed or boiled. His body was so strong that even hell couldn't trap him. It was said that both hell and heaven put up signs to prohibit him from entering. Black Panther was quite capable for Amanda to be able to capture such a powerful person. Does Dr. Quinn know anything about him? Does he have a weakness? Amanda's eyes were sharp. She thought about the past and felt that Thea might know something about the alien in the cell. Before Thea could speak, the macho man inside shouted, The only macho man has no weakness. He's invincible. Could it be that this guy is a lunatic? Looking at the brawny man whose hands and feet were chained to the metal frame in the cell and who was screaming hysterically, Moira was a little surprised. She had always lived in the relatively peaceful Star City, and had never seen such a fierce person. This guy doesn't have a fatal weakness, but I know he likes dolphins. Isn't that right, Rob from Planet Sonia? Thea's last sentence was naturally directed at the cell. The other party instantly quieted down. His voice fluctuated. You know me? I heard about you from the Green Lantern Corps. Missy threw the blame to him. Go find trouble with the Green Lantern Corps if you can. Thea thought for a moment. This guy looked like a rough guy, but he was actually quite intelligent. He could even understand the theory behind the Atomic Man's suit. He had a genius level of intelligence and knew more than 10,000 languages. It was a pity that he was locked up here. Although he killed everyone on his planet, the future Batman pulled him into the American Justice League. The people on Earth probably wouldn't mind. Thea immediately said, Rob, let's make a deal? There was silence for a few seconds. Only Macho Man doesn't believe you. How about this? Let's make a 2-year agreement. Use your knowledge and combat power to help the people of Earth, and we'll give you your freedom. I'll also personally give you a cosmic dolphin. What do you think? Thea felt that if Batman could whitewash this guy, she could too. Killing the people of an entire planet had nothing to do with the people of Earth. When Amanda heard that her prisoner was going to be released, she wanted to say something a few times, but she held herself back. She felt that this prison was impregnable, but Thea had a different opinion. With her sharp eyes, Thea had already noticed that it wasn't difficult for Robert to break free from his shackles. It was just that she didn't know what was going on in this guy's head, which was why he hadn't acted yet. There was no need for her to be criticized at all. She calmly exposed this layer of window paper. Stop pretending. Sit up and let's talk. As soon as she finished speaking, Robert suddenly sat up under Amanda's nervous gaze. The metal shackles that bound his hands and feet broke like pieces of paper. Thea glanced at Amanda. The meaning in her eyes was nothing more than, "See, if I didn't come today, your intestines would have been pulled out and strangled by this rough guy next time." There was finally a trace of panic in Amanda's expression. The enemy wasn't restrained. If he rushed out, she, as an ordinary person, couldn't stop him. Robert broke free from his shackles, stretched his hands and feet, walked to the side of the cell, and looked at Thea through a thick layer of metal. He was 2 meters tall, and Thea was also 1.8 meters tall. She was wearing high heels, so the difference in height between them wasn't big. Robert's blood-red eyes looked at her for a long time, and the corner of his mouth had a trace of a sneer. "I've killed a few guys like you." Thea wasn't surprised that Robert had killed gods. The universe was too big, and there were always some old gods that fell into the hands of the strong and became a boast. Thea was fearless. "I'm not like them. You're no match for me." "Haha. You're very strong. Do you have a space dolphin?" The two didn't talk about the release, and only talked about the content of the deal. "Yes, I only have 2, and I spent a lot of money to buy them." Thea controlled a large neutral business alliance. Diana liked all kinds of rare materials, and she liked cute little animals. There were very few space dolphins in the entire universe. This animal was similar to the Earth's dolphins. Its body was shiny, its belly was white, and its tail was swinging. It looked silly. The only difference was the living environment. One lived in the sea and the other lived in space. Other habits were similar. Thea searched the universe and only found 2. Now, she was ready to take out one to make a deal. A bunch of Earth people couldn't compare to the value of a space dolphin. Robert was very clear. His eyes seemed to fall into some kind of memory. He could feel Thea's divine power. Robert didn't know what a god was, but he had been on the battlefield for a long time. He did kill old gods, and more than one. Making a deal with a strong person was completely in line with his principles. Not to mention that it was a space dolphin. He was still worried and asked, "As long as I help the Earthlings for 2 years?" "Yes, you can't kill and you can't destroy. If the Earthlings ask you anything, you must tell them if you know. If there is an invasion, no matter what you are doing, you must wholeheartedly help the Earthlings to fight." Thea stated her requirements. Robert's scary big face thought for a while, and his scarlet eyes looked straight at Thea. "Okay, I promise you." Thea nodded and pulled Moira back a few steps. The 2 ministers and Amanda didn't know what she meant, but they also stepped back. Next, Robert punched the wall of the metal cell fiercely. The cell shook violently, but it didn't break. Amanda was relieved. However, this was just the beginning. Robert fully demonstrated what madness was to them. If one punch couldn't break it, he punched 10 times. When his left hand was broken, he changed to his right hand. When his right hand was also distorted, his left hand returned to normal. When he punched the 33rd time, the cell finally couldn't bear the weight and a big hole with a diameter of 1/2 meter was punched out. "The only fierce man is out. Where's the dolphin?" Robert didn't even look at his bloody fists. He opened his mouth and asked about the dolphin. "See, Amanda? Your cell can't hold him at all." Thea looked at Black Panther playfully. Amanda felt lucky and embarrassed. She was speechless to the extreme. She secretly decided that she would send the guy who designed the cell to the Siberian Observatory later. "Where's the only fierce man's dolphin?" Robert saw that she ignored him and asked angrily. Don't worry, don't worry." Thea comforted him first. She didn't raise this thing on Earth. Chapter 650. The space dolphins were all raised in the universe. Sia opened a long-distance teleportation door and searched with her divine sense. She grabbed a round guy from the other side of the teleportation door. The sky dolphin was very uncomfortable when it was suddenly caught underground from the starry sky. When it saw Thea, it let out a happy cry and rubbed its big head against her calf for a while. Damn it! She was a little reluctant. Thea gently patted the dolphin's big head and felt that she should have lent it to Robber for 2 years instead of giving it to him. Unfortunately, she had already said it. Mortals could regret it, but she, the goddess of trade, could not easily break the deal. She could only pat the dolphin's big head and point at Robber regretfully. The intelligence of the Earth's dolphins was not low, and this dolphin floating in the air was even smarter. When it realized that its owner was going to abandon it, its happy little face suddenly collapsed and it cried twice with ultrasonic sound that normal people could not hear. Fortunately, Robber also had some skills. He sent out the same ultrasonic sound as the dolphin, and the man and the dolphin communicated. The little dolphin was in a dilemma and finally swam to Robber according to Thea's idea. Haha! You have gained the friendship of the only fierce man. I will help you in the next 2 years. Robber's big face was still ferocious, but he really liked dolphins. He rubbed his rough face hard against the little dolphin. The other party spat on his face, but he was not angry. Instead, he laughed. Moira saw that her daughter was a little disappointed, so she quickly changed the topic and whispered, "Won't this guy go back on his words?" Thea's disappointment came and went quickly. When she heard her mother's words, she said happily, "Robber's reputation is very good. He never goes back on his words. He will be our help in the next 2 years." Moira looked at the rough man who was teasing the little dolphin. From this angle, he did not look as fierce as before. The fear disappeared, and the politician's mind came out again. Can the Earth's dolphins also attract him? Thea thought for a moment. She remembered that Earth's dolphins also attracted him. It should be possible. Then it's easy. Moira nodded immediately. It was easy to deal with someone with a hobby. Didn't he like dolphins? Later, she would let her subordinates raise 180 dolphins. Such a super powerful force would be tied to the Earth. Was there a more suitable business than this? Getting rid of a hidden danger in advance and turning an enemy into a friend was a good thing for everyone. Rob's conduct was completely different from that of a superhero. In addition, this fellow had a fierce look on his face and a repulsive appearance. Who would believe that he was a superhero? However, as the hidden card of the government and the Heaven's Eye Society, Berserk Wolf Luo Bo would be very competent. Even Amanda was wondering if she should send the guy who designed the prison cell to raise dolphins instead of going to Siberia. Seeing that Robert and the little dolphin were playing happily, they decided to continue their sightseeing trip. Thea didn't have a habit of spoiling him. She had already given away her cute pet, so she should at least hear something. "Rob, follow me." Her tone was similar to ordering a slave. Violent Wolf Robber's expression was furious at first, but then it gradually calmed down. In the end, he even revealed a self-satisfied smile. "You're the boss. I'll listen to you. I'll listen to you." F***CK. Seeing this scene, Amanda was even more convinced of the importance of vigorously developing marine aquaculture. "Grandson, when the time comes, I'll smash you to death with 1,000 dolphins." The designer of the Sky's Eye Society's prison cell should be dragged out and shot, but the planner was still commendable. On the same floor, another cell was a few hundred meters away. There were several partitions in the middle and the path was very winding. Even if one of the prisoners escaped, the whole cell wouldn't be destroyed. Thea also asked Violent Wolf, "Do you know who else is on this floor?" He glanced at her and continued to tease the dolphin, shaking his head to show that he didn't know. The few of them walked into a cell that was filled with yellow light. Amanda pointed at a woman in green who was sleeping on her side and introduced, "Mr. President, the woman you're looking at now was captured after we sacrificed a lot of agents. Her technological weapons are very, very special." "Are you talking about that ball? Why didn't you confiscate her weapon?" Moira asked, pointing to an eyeball floating beside the woman that seemed to be magnified more than 10 times. "This weapon is beyond our scope of understanding. It seems to have some kind of displacement ability. Even if we take it away and imprison it, it will automatically return to the woman. Her weapon can absorb the energy in the air and turn it into an energy beam to launch it. We accidentally found that it has a particularly poor resistance to yellow light, which led to the scene you see today." Amanda said it so casually that she didn't even mention the sacrifice of the agents in the process. Thea just looked and didn't speak. She also knew this guy who was locked up. She was the Queen of Emerald Eyes who came from the 31st century. Her weapon was the result of technological transformation of the eyes of an alien green lantern. She didn't know what kind of black technology they used to add some green light ring functions in the eyeball, which was why it could emit green light beams and was afraid of yellow light. Moira glanced at Thea as if nothing had happened. Thea shook her head gently. This woman was different from Violent Wolf. She had no value. It was impossible for the big eyeball weapon to be popularized. If the Earth's army had a magically modified light ring, it would be a disaster. Even if the young lady now mastered almost 3 kinds of emotional spectrum, she had to say that once emotional energy was abused, the universe would explode in minutes. The Queen of Emerald Eyes also didn't have the experience of clearing her name, so let her continue to stay in prison. Amanda was also staring at her face. Seeing her shake her head, she felt relieved. She continued to take them to see the last prisoner. This cell was thicker and larger than the previous 2. From a distance, it looked like half of a mountain had been cut off and a small part in the middle was hollowed out to hold the prisoner. There were no electrical components, no mechanical devices, and the most important thing was that there was no light inside, not even a trace of light. Sorry, Mr. President, we can only look at this prisoner. Amanda pointed to the thing that looked more like a boulder than a cell and said to them, "What a joke, Amanda. What do you want us to see?" The current Minister of Defense, General Ryan, who accompanied the tour, was very upset. The Ministry of Defense didn't know about these 3 prisoners. If Thea hadn't exposed them today, how long would they have been kept in the dark? Mr. Minister, Amanda didn't lie. This prisoner is really dangerous. Thea looked inside and was indeed shocked. She hurriedly stopped the old general who was about to argue with Amanda. This prisoner was very dangerous, at least to ordinary people. It was definitely the highest level of danger. She turned to Black Panther and asked, "I want to ask a question. This target seems to be beyond the limit of your ability. Can you tell me how you captured him?" Amanda sighed. She had nothing better to do but offend the Ministry of Defense. She had no choice. This guy wasn't captured by us. He came here on his own accord. He called himself Johnny Solo. We've investigated him, and if his name isn't wrong, he used to be a mime. However, he disappeared due to an accident, and when he reappeared, his appearance had changed greatly. He claimed that he came here to surrender on the orders of a god called the King of Tears. Although we can't show you now, we still have the video from before. Amanda then handed Moira a tablet. Everyone, including Thea, came over to watch it. The video was very short. A well-dressed man walked into the Heaven's Eye Society's base calmly. Faced with several weapons aimed at him, he raised his hands and surrendered. Chapter 651. However, when the agents took off his hood, they were all shocked. He was glowing faintly, and there was a mask on his face. He didn't have the brain or hair that a normal person would have. There was only a mask on his face, and there was nothing behind it. After the agents of the Sky's Eye Society inspected him, an even more shocking fact was revealed. He was wearing human clothes, but there was no body. His suit, tie, and gloves were all just decorations. Other than calling himself Johnny Solo and surrendering to the Sky's Eye Society under the orders of someone called the King of Tears, he refused to reveal any information. When Amanda asked him to take off his mask, he said very seriously that anyone who saw his face would die. Seeing such a great danger to society, Amanda had no choice but to lock him up until today. Thea observed him for a long time. He wasn't lying. Anyone who saw his face would die. This guy's aura was undoubtedly that of a god's chosen. However, this King of Tears didn't seem to be a god from Earth. She wasn't surprised. There were very few gods, but there were also a lot of them. Earth had a bunch of gods, so there were naturally some on other planets as well. Hiromir, who was killed earlier, was a god from Mars. Rao, who Supergirl Fiora and the others always talked about, was also a god from Krypton. It wasn't surprising that there was a god that she didn't know. This King of Tears was different from the professional gods on Earth. He was more like a god of rules. The big rules, such as time, space, life and death. These were rules that even Darkseid was dumbfounded when he saw them. He couldn't understand anything else either. However, this god was different. He wrote a rule of his own, and that was to kill anyone who saw him. In Thea's opinion, this rule was too restrictive. One had to see him for it to take effect. According to this rule, the air would disappear when it saw him, and the stars would explode when they saw him. However, he couldn't withstand such a huge backlash, so he had to find a place to hide. This chosen completely followed his teachings. He usually wore a mask, but when he needed to, he would take it off. Wow, the world would be peaceful. This attack method was exactly the same as Diana's usual accumulation of power by wearing the silver guardian bracelet, and the artificial spiritual talent that Thea had created for Cassandra. They both required daily accumulation. Seeing that Amanda was looking at her with hope, Black Panther couldn't wait for the Missy to quickly pull this bomb away and throw this planet at the edge of the universe as far away as possible. However, she was disappointed. Thea shrugged and said, "Sorry, I really don't know anything about this guy. I can only be sure that this god is not from Earth. This guy is a half-spirit. I don't think I can kill him with my current methods." As for the Tear King behind him, Thea frowned and racked her memory. She remembered that the King of Tears had come to Earth, but he was quickly defeated by the spirits and turned into a teardrop. Who is stronger between me and Ghost? Ghost has the problem of being strong at times and weak at other times, but overall, he is still very strong. After all, he is the vengeful spirit of God. Just like the guardian of OUA planet, Gonda, once said that Ghost was not as strong as him, and he was pressed to the ground and called Daddy after 2 seconds. Thea was definitely stronger than Gonda now, but she did not think that she could defeat the vengeful spirit of God. Among the people she had met so far, the strongest were the 3 demonic palaces, the Heavenly Father, and Zeus, who had gone to create a Smurf. The only ones who were stronger than her were Hades, Mithrin, and a few others, but they weren't much stronger than her. The Heavenly Father should be on the same level as Zeus, and the 3 palace demons should be stronger than them. In general, the 3 palace demons were not as strong as Ghost. Thea felt that Ghost would not have any more trouble fighting her than fighting Gonda. At most, she would last for 2 more moves. The conclusion made her unhappy. In the eyes of the real bosses, she was probably not much different from Amanda and the others. Ghost was not a suitable reference. It was hard to tell who was stronger between the King of Tears and Thea. She thought about it and decided to be more cautious. This King of Tears should be very strong. Maybe stronger than me. I suggest that we keep him here. Amanda was speechless. Why would you keep such a dangerous person with me? Aren't you embarrassed? The young lady was very thick-skinned. She chose to ignore Amanda's resentful gaze. She pulled her mother out without saying anything. General Ryan did not dare to stay any longer when he saw that even a superhero like her was about to run away. He hurriedly followed the team. Before everyone boarded the plane, Thea thought about it and taught Amanda a method. That guy has surpassed the definition of life and death. You can't kill him with your current methods, but you can restrain him. Amanda immediately listened carefully. He has the law of death when he sees someone's face. It's not difficult for you to deal with him. Set up a few more mirrors. The moment he takes off his mask, you can use the mirrors to reflect his face. Then he'll die? Amanda was very concerned about this bomb that could explode at any time. She asked hurriedly. I don't think he'll die. But according to our language, the most we can do is exile him out of the material world. As for where he'll go after that, I don't know. Thea was not lying. This Johnny Solo had been active for a long time. He was the enemy of the Justice Association. He was a villain who had been defeated many times. His physical body had been sacrificed to the King of Tears. It was a bit like a lich's phylactery. He was immune to any external damage. Unless the King of Tears was killed, this half-spirit could not be killed. After that, she gave Amanda a teleportation gem just in case. Then, the group left Belgrave Prison. As for Violent Wolf Rob, he was directly sent to the Alien Administrative Committee. Fiora was one of the leaders after all, so she could not fight often. Now, with Firestorm and Violent Wolf, the Administrative Committee finally had something to show for it. In the dead of night, Thea returned to the underground of Belgrave Prison. There were too many people during the day, so it was very inconvenient to do anything. Naturally, she returned to deal with this hidden danger. Since he was willing to walk into the trap, then she would let him continue to stay. She did not know the effect of the Eye of Obliteration on this guy who did not have a physical body, so she chose a safer method. That was the method that many heroes used to deal with the great demon king. Seal him. The research of modern magic on seals could be said to have reached a peak. The young mistress, who had combined the strengths of ancient and modern magic, was one of the best. She drew a magic circle and created nodes. Finally, Thea connected the magic circle to the new creator star's magic net and used the magic net to power the seal. In order to prevent him from suddenly activating his power, Thea set up 2 seals. Even if one was broken, the other would immediately replace it. Chapter 652. According to Thea's calculations, Johnny Solo's ultimate ability only lasted for a short period of time. If he didn't accumulate 500 years worth of time, he wouldn't be able to break through the second seal. Of course, this was the most conservative calculation. If an ex-mime could understand the law of magic so easily, the current generation of sorcerers would have to kill themselves with a piece of tofu. Thea even maliciously thought that this guy might need 500 years to figure out the law of the enchantment. Another 500 years of accumulation? By the time he came out, the King of Tears had already turned into ashes. After solving the hidden danger as a nameless hero, Thea and Moira patrolled around the country for the next few days. It took them half a month to sort out all the relationships and get their work on the right track. It was hard to say whether the halo of being the first daughter or being a superhero was more dazzling, but she was now more eye-catching. She didn't deliberately avoid the attention of the outside world, but the intimate image of her and Diana was still unknowingly taken. Thanks to the fact that Diana's true identity was not exposed, yes, that's right, the heroine's high-speed movement during the battle, coupled with her shoulder-length hair, armor and greatsword, different from her usual ponytail and glasses, made these seriously face-blind media unable to recognize her. The romance of a superhero. This was a tabloid, and they directly used eye-catching headlines to attract attention. The first daughter's mysterious lover is a British aristocrat. This was not wrong. Diana was now a British citizen, because she had been in the front line of poverty eradication for many years, and she also had a knighthood awarded by the Queen. Those with the title of doctor must be addressed as doctor, and those with titles must be addressed as Your Excellency. Diana had to be addressed as Your Excellency Prince in official media reports. For a time, Britain and the United States were arguing because of their relationship. Britain looked down on the other side of the ocean, thinking that they were just nouveau riche, and their words were full of jealousy. So what if they were rich? Could they do whatever they wanted with money? At the same time, the other side looked down on them, thinking that they were just poor relatives, and at the same time, they were also envious of the history of the old aristocrats. The ancestral land and old houses were not worth much, but when they bragged about William the Conqueror, it was much better than the few poor houses on the Mayflower. Because their relationship was exposed, the media on both sides of the ocean attacked each other, and the two parties were not aware of it, doing what they should do. What a joke! Moira entered the White House. Thea did not go there often, especially when Diana was around. She was lying in her mansion in the metropolis, holding a newly published comic in her hand. The content of the comic was a little evil. It was about her and Diana's story. The young mistress was engrossed in the painting. Her image was 70 to 80% similar to a certain Toria. The artist had most likely studied art at the foot of a basin, and the style of the painting was exquisite and beautiful. In order to show off the aura of a superpower and suppress the Englishman, a crown was added to her head, making her look even more alike. Because they did not know the true strength of the heroine, they made up a story about a queen rescuing a sick girl. The rest of the story was about the ancient aristocrats and the king of the new era meeting and getting to know each other, all the way to the end of the story where they fell in love. Valkyrie picked up the comic and flipped through it. The entire story was about how the young mistress was wise and mighty in fighting criminals, while she herself was a salted fish who only knew how to shout, "Loo loo 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 loo." This made her very unhappy. How could they draw her so weak? Why am I so weak? This is too much. Looking at Diana's red face, Thea held her belly and laughed, causing Diana to chase after her. Diana's original purpose was to protect the Earth, and she did not want to expose her true identity. Although she was very unhappy, she did not run to the media to show her strength. However, 2 days later, she regretted it. A group of criminals somehow found out her whereabouts. In order to become famous, they avoided Thea, and more than 10 people with automatic weapons went to kidnap the sick girl, Diana Prince. Even with the wisdom of Athena, Diana was initially confused. It took her a long time to realize that these people thought she was a pushover. Wonder Woman exploded and taught these ignorant criminals an unforgettable lesson. Are you still not going to reveal your true identity? Thea asked while holding back her laughter. Diana thought carefully for a long time, but still shook her head. Mother said that my duty was to silently protect the Earth and mankind. I should not be exposed. Seeing that she was unwilling, Thea did not force her. As long as this period of time passed, the media would naturally be too lazy to report it. Time passed slowly, and it was already March. Moira had been in office for 2 months. Last month, she personally landed on Mars. This was the first national leader to land on an alien planet. This alone was enough to be recorded in history. Thea and Diana's storm gradually subsided in the official media, but on some indescribable websites, the two had become a hot search term, with all kinds of pictures and comics. Some of the artists were really good, and Milady even registered an account just to follow the latest issue. In between her daily entertainment, she did not forget about her business. Technological products were slowly being transferred to civilian use. Although the military was dissatisfied, in the face of the huge financial group, their complaints were dispensable. Clean energy projects had always been the focus of the Quinn Group's development. Even during the time of Robert Sr., it was the group's main product. Now Milady, who was full of black technology, had maximized this advantage. She did not need to control all the resources, nor did she have that much energy. Trade and wealth were not about accumulation, but about circulation. So, it was imperative to share some of the work and profits. In just a month, the Quinn Group continued to cooperate with financial groups from all over the world. Flying in the sky, running on the ground, swimming in the water, clothing, food, housing, transportation, all kinds of industries came to seek cooperation. Now, in her office was an old acquaintance, Lex Luthor's sister, Lena Luthor. This little girl was 2 years younger than Thea. She inherited the mess left by her brother early and worked hard in the business world. Luthor Enterprises, which had been eroded by many investors, now showed signs of revival. Although Thea was also one of these investors, it did not affect the relationship between the two. Especially after the little girl knew that she was a superhero, she even had a little admiration. Well, Lena, I've finished reading your plan. If you can understand the technology of the maglev car, then we can cooperate. After finalizing the intention of cooperation, the specific details could be discussed by the subordinates. Even if Luthor Enterprises was not as good as it used to be, with the scientific and technological achievements left behind before, it was still a behemoth. It could be revived by handling a few big projects. Lena was not like her evil-looking mother, nor was she as arrogant as her brother. It could be said that she was an anomaly in the Luthor family. Chapter 653. The two of them chatted for a while before Lena got up and left. When she pushed the door open, she bumped into another girl. The two of them didn't know each other, but the friendly Lena still greeted each other. The two of them nodded and brushed past each other. Thea then looked at the person at the door and was surprised. Kara? What's the matter? Little Supergirl, who had a lot on her mind, turned around and watched Lena walk away before she slowly walked into the office. She looked around for a long time, and Thea was confused. The young mistress did not know what she was up to. She sat calmly on the chair and waited. Today, little Supergirl came to visit in normal clothes. Whether it was the Martian hunter, Superman, or even her adoptive mother, they all asked her to keep a low profile. The consequence of keeping a low profile was that her taste in clothes was a mess. It was clearly a dress that cost thousands of dollars, but it smelled like dirt when she wore it. Sister Thea. Supergirl took off her glasses and looked around. When she saw that the environment was safe, she spoke in a low voice. The young mistress crossed her legs and waited for her to continue. Look at my ears. Supergirl clenched her fists and finally said a complete sentence. Thea looked at Supergirl, who lifted her hair and white earlobes. She was confused. What was she trying to show her? Little Supergirl seemed to know that her behavior was ridiculous. She explained embarrassedly. That. I don't have ear piercings. Thea saw her touching her ears and could not help but touch her own ears. Why was she telling her this all of a sudden? Hey, why don't you get it? The girl was a little anxious. I want to make a hole, but Earth's tools won't work. Damn, Sia finally realized what was going on. Who knew what she was trying to say? She just wanted to make an ear piercing. She did not expect the Kryptonian's body of steel to have such a problem. Looking at Supergirl's pitiful eyes, the young mistress scratched her head. Divine bodies did not have such a problem. They could control every muscle to make ear piercings automatically. She was like that, and so was Diana. But the Kryptonians did not know how to do it. She first contacted Fiora, who was working as the head of the Alien Merchant Alliance to develop the trade. At first, the female adjutant thought it was a big deal. When she heard that it was such a problem, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, she had pierced her ears on Krypton. At that time, she had not absorbed the yellow sun, and her body was only slightly stronger than that of the people on Earth. She did not have the problem that Kara was having now. When Kara left Krypton, he was only 12 years old. He was still young, so he missed the best opportunity. Right now, Fiora couldn't think of any good ideas. Thea then went to ask Superman. Clark didn't need to have his ears pierced, but how did he clean up the stubble on his face? Thea was just about to make a call to ask. Heat rays. After getting this answer, Thea was stunned for a moment. Presumably, in order to come up with this method, Superman must have spent a lot of time practicing. Thea put down the phone and said to Supergirl with uncertainty, "Try using heat rays. Control the temperature and use the refraction of the mirror." As it turned out, Supergirl was indeed an amazing warrior. She could learn all the skills related to combat in one go. Unfortunately, heat rays could only shave the stubble. If it was too much heat, the mirror would not be able to withstand it. If it was too little, it would be ineffective. Thea tried using her gaze again, but the effect was minimal. She was afraid that if she used too much force, Supergirl's ears would be destroyed. That would be a great sin. Let's do it the hard way. Follow me. The office could not do such a big job. Thea dragged Supergirl to Paradise Island. Diana also heard the news and came to watch the show. A fine gold drill, paired with an electric drill that I added some speed. Come lie here. Let's try it. The young lady rolled up her sleeves, wore a hat, a mask, and a white lab coat. She held the electric drill like a mad scientist and gestured for Supergirl to lie down. Looking at the shiny electric drill in her hand, Supergirl would be lying if she said she was not afraid. However, when she thought about how others could wear earrings while she could not, she gritted her teeth and endured it. Kara lay on the rock as if she was going to be executed. Thea tied up Kara's hair, adjusted it, and pierced it into her ears. It had to be said that after being modified with advanced technology, her electric drill had a high conversion rate of speed. Paired with a fine gold drill, which was already hard to begin with, and added with toughness and sharpness enchantments, she had a 30% chance of piercing Kara's ears. However, reality gave her a slap in the face. The speed power she stole from Reverse Lightning ran wildly. The drill shattered into pieces and Supergirl screamed. Thea thought that something happened and hurriedly stopped. However, when she asked about the situation, she found out that it was too noisy. She sealed off Supergirl's 5 senses and ignored the bitterness on Supergirl's face. Thea took the electric drill and continued to strike. After drilling for 3 minutes, she stood up embarrassedly. The fine gold drill was ground to nothing. Under the high-speed rotation, it completely turned into powder. After pulling Kara up and blowing off the fine gold powder on her face, Diana and Thea looked at each other. Kara's earlobe was still small and clean. There was not even a mark on it. Maybe the fine gold isn't tough enough. Can we try a dragon tooth that is tougher and tougher? Forger Master Diana suggested. After a quarter of an hour, only half of the dragon tooth was left. However, Kara's ear was still nowhere to be seen. The little girl seemed to know that she had caused trouble for the 2 big sisters. She shrunk her neck and did not dare to say anything. Diana hugged her elbows and tilted her head. After thinking for a long time, she took out a dark green thin sword. Hermes' snake sword. It's one of the best even among the divine weapons. It contains a trace of space attribute. Thea happily took it. The 2 did not ask for the little girl's opinion. One sat on her, and the other pressed her feet. From afar, it looked like they were doing something bad. They gave Kara another round of punishment. The 2 big sisters were sweating from exhaustion. Perhaps the space attribute worked. They finally saw some effect. A small hole was made in Kara's ear. However, it was too early for them to be happy. Before the 3 girls could celebrate, they saw the hole in her ear closed instantly. Thea was so angry that her eyes were straight. She gasped for breath. You. Forcing me to use kryptonite. Kara was also about to cry. Her healing ability was so strong. There was nothing she could do. Kryptonite could only be talked about. Unlike Superman, who had a complete outlook on the world and life, to a certain extent, He could rely on his willpower to resist the damage of kryptonite. Kara Danvers was just a little girl. She did not have willpower. As soon as Thea took out her kryptonite, she fell to the ground like a salted fish without even touching it. If there was direct skin contact, wouldn't the little girl die instantly? Why don't I use the holy sword? It can permanently damage Doomsday. It's easy to give you an ear, Thea said as she pulled out the holy sword. Did she have to make such a big fuss? Kara looked at the dazzling sword and felt his liver tremble. Diana looked at her lover in annoyance. You can't control that sword well, right? Do you have any technological means? Yes, technological means. Kara nodded like a chick pecking at rice. She was afraid that the holy sword would cut off her ear.